see. Let's see. Hey, I'm here. I'm almost ready. Give me one. I'm almost ready. Give me one. Sorry. Oh, I get it. Makes sense. Go live. Okay. Sorry about that. Give me one sec. Okay, I'm still getting ready. I'm setting everything up. I just got back from work, but I will be ready to go in a little bit. Is everyone doing okay?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
I just turned up my volume, and yeah, give me one sec while I adjust. I'm gonna here. Let me see.
Coco, one quick thing. So people were concerned they want you to leave the comments on. I don't know how you feel about that, but
Yeah, I'll probably leave it. I'll probably leave it on.
okay.
Do not effects. Hold on. Give me one sec. And oh wait, hold. Oh shoot. Yeah, I'm almost there. And this download. That's all I need. And perfect. Okay, I'm gonna grab my food. I'm gonna go to my desk, and then we'll be good to go. How's everyone doing today? You guys doing okay? You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Atheist.
So like,
Yeah, everybody.
Jim, average Justin, 1, 2, 3, 4, all 5 judges, and then like I need to bring Cease to Knows here, and then I need to bring Bart up here.
Bart's running. Bart's running.
Oh, he's running a little late.
Oh, there he is. I thought maybe he was running. I'm just kidding.
Okay, Bart, you're here. You good to go?
Good to go, Co. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty good. Okay, I'm bring my food upstairs, grab some water, and then we'll be good to go. Sorry about the delay.
Wait, quick question.
Yeah.
Did Bart agree to the extending of the opening a little bit or no?
Yeah, I need to talk to Bart about that. I was just about to message him, but I was running short on time.
Whoa,
Bart,
whoa. What's going on here? We're changing the rules already.
No, I
Yeah.
was just gonna ask if you wanted to make it instead of 5 minutes, like something like 7 minutes, just so we don't have to rush through it. It's up to you. It doesn't really matter. But
No. I'm
um,
just messing with you, Cease. That should be just fine. Yeah.
okay, cool.
Okay, I'm almost there. Man, I was like speeding home and like rushing. Well, okay, no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. I was driving safely. But I left my job once it ended, and I was like coming home. I ate a lot of Smarties, and like I had sort of a crash. So I'm like awake, but like I'm sort of tired. I'm gonna grab some water. I'll be right back.
You better grab a lot of water because it's about to get spicy in here.
And thanks again to all the judges for being part of this. I really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah, thank you for having us.
and also thank you for
Here so I don't get fined.
Wait, who did we just lose?
Saul.
There we go.
Okay, I am back. Okay, how's everyone doing today? Everyone in the comments, how you guys doing today? It is good to see everybody. Judges, you guys all doing pretty good?
Yeah, I'm excited. This will be fun.
Okay, yeah, this was a really great project. I put a lot of effort into this. I wanted to do this formal debate the best that I could and like make it a really good formal debate. We formatted it. The criteria for grading the debate was inspired by the California State University. We used one of their rubrics to inspire some of the grading criteria. Bart, I am very grateful for your expertise on like the point categories. And yeah, we made it very professional. And
For sure.
I am almost ready. I'm gonna start with like my beginning spiel, and then we're gonna dive into Bart's. Cease to Know wanted to extend it from 5 minutes, or no, from 7 minutes to 8 minutes, I think. But I have to take a look.
5 minutes to 7 or 8 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, that should be totally fine. It'll actually help me be a little bit more paced with my opening since I was kind of condensing things.
Okay. And so I'm going to set that up really quickly. Here, what are we looking at? Let's see. Okay. I'm Mr. Coco. And here, let me adjust my settings. Flip my camera. And then, yeah, you guys can see me. And then, yeah, there's me. Hold on. Put my hat. And cool. Then I've got this. Okay, bear with me, guys. Bear with me. I'm almost there. Bear with me. And I'm going to set up a timer really quick, and then we should be good to go. Thank you guys for all the gifts. I really appreciate it. Sending it to everybody. All these guys on the panel, they really deserve it. Thank you guys for being here to judge the debate. And thank you guys for even debating, giving me a chance to host this debate. Let's see, timer. And pull up Google Drive. Okay, and without any further ado, we can start the debate. Okay, so everyone, thank you for being here. I got 76 people in here, which is absolutely amazing. Thank you guys all for being here. I'm gonna start off with like a little speech. I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible. And we made a little bit of an adjustment to the opening statements. So I think there's going to be 7 minutes for the opening statements. Let me adjust my timer really quick. 7. No, hold on. 2. And yeah, that should be good. And so, yeah, I'll say my speech and then we'll get started. Everyone feeling okay? Everyone okay with me doing my speech in the beginning? All the judges good?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Cool. So I just want to say hello, 84 people that are in here. Hello, debate attendees, debaters, and judges. I want to start by welcoming you all to my first official formatted debate. And I want to thank you all for being here, giving me a chance and like watching it and supporting me. Thank you to all the judges for being willing to judge the debate. Thank you for the debaters for being willing to debate. And thank you to both the debaters and the judges for being patient and willing through the process of setting this whole thing up. It was a lot of organization, a little bit of money invested. I tried to make this as best as I possibly could. I think the debate format is perfect along with the rubric. And if this goes really well, then I'll probably do this in the future. The proposition being debated tonight is the following. Belief in the existence of God is rational. The affirmative will be presented by Bart, also known as the TikTok username Barter Outpost. Bart is a prominent deist on TikTok and YouTube who creates content and discusses philosophical and social issues through dialectical analysis. His fields of study are political science and law. The opposition will be presented by Cease to Know, also known as the TikTok username Cease to Know. Cease is an agnostic atheist, well established in the debate scene with a bachelor's and master's degree in philosophy. He is a co-host of the YouTube channel Axioms on Trial, where he discusses philosophy, politics, and religion. As for the judges who are here today, the judges that I really appreciate, thank you for being here. We have Average Justin, a 4th-year student at Arizona State University, majoring in the academic study of religion with a concentration in religion and conflict. He has a platform here on TikTok where he discusses religion, politics, culture, and armed conflicts in military history. We have, forgive me if I pronounce this the wrong way, but well, actually, let me call you Saul Severe. Is that okay, Saul?
Perfect.
Okay. Saul is a deist. He is a systems engineer as well as a digital marketing strategist with a background in crowd psychology. He is also a continental philosopher who has studied and continues to study theological paradigms. He has authored and self-published a disquisition regarding will titled Ripples of Will. His spiritual designation is Luciferian Gnostic, who adheres to theosophy as a base philosophical framework and considers himself a neo-deist. Next we have, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, Daragon, right?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. He is an agnostic Christian, hard determinist with a mechanical engineering degree. He also takes part in general studies in physics, mathematics, and philosophy, as well as first-century history. We next have Sir Fraley, who is an agnostic. He is a content creator deeply passionate about early Christian history, historical Jesus studies, and the philosophy of religion with a keen interest in arguments for the existence of God. Additionally, Sir Fraley proudly supports the Pat Voss 2026 campaign as an independent, self-appointed activist. And then lastly, last but not least, we have Just Jim, who is an atheist, a prominent atheist on TikTok who debates about philosophy and religion and is constantly learning. He has a background in architecture and is currently a commercial photographer. For my judges today, I believe we have 2 atheists, we have 1 deist, we have an agnostic, and we have a theist Christian to balance it out and make sure that the judgment is like not biased towards atheism, Christianity, or really anything. Rubrics have been handed and supplied to the judges, and they will record and submit their scores in order to determine the winner. This will determine who won the judging portion of the debate by the judges. As for the audience, thank you guys for being here again. I made a video earlier today, and in the comment section, I posted a link to a Google Doc where you guys can also look at the same criteria the judges have for grading this debate, and you can also determine who won. You can send me like DMs. I'll count up the votes within 48 hours, and that will determine like who's the winner via the audience votes. So the debaters today, they can win either in 2 ways or 1 way. They can win by the judge's decisions, but also like the audience decisions. And that'd be a really cool way for the audience to interact with the debate. I also urge both the judges and the audience to set aside, to the best of your abilities, your proclivities and personal dispositions on the issues that are going to be discussed today to make the best judgment of who had the better skills and who clearly won you over and in this debate. At the end of the debate, there will be time for the audience to ask questions to the debaters, and while they do this, the judges will be finalizing their scores. After audience questions, the judges will reveal their scores to determine the winner and vocalize any thoughts or comments they might have about the debate. Also, I want to remind the audience to remember not to harass anybody that's on the panel today. After the debate is finished, they are human beings and they've taken time out of their day to do this for your entertainment, for my entertainment. So please, regardless of whether you disagree or agree with the views or the decisions made by the judges, let's be respectful. And also a real quick reminder, feel free to gift any of the judges, gift me, the host, gift the debaters. This helps them to like run their channels, to do this for a living, and to continue to make good content about like philosophy, religion. All of the people on the panel do very well in doing that and help educate the TikTok community and people coming in and wanting to learn about this stuff as new people. With no further delay, thank you guys for being here. Thank you everyone for being here. That's the end of my opening speech. And Bart, we're going to start you off with your 7-minute, let me look at like the itinerary really quick, with your 7-minute opening argument. Are you ready, Bart?
Good to go.
Okay. And I'm starting your time right now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ko, and likewise to the judges and my opponent, Cease. I am tasked now to substantiate the proposition that the belief in the existence of God is rational. And I begin by laying a foundation: knowledge versus belief. Knowledge and belief are both attitudinal positions relative to conceptions and or propositions. Compare the claims, this car has an electric motor, with Rembrandt painted this anonymous painting. The former can be demonstrated via a combination of empirical data and a rational parsing of that data. The latter, however, as used in this hypothetical, is not necessarily amenable to such a degree of demonstration. From this we can infer the following standards. Justifiable knowledge claims are underpinned by demonstrability of rationally defined objects and or concepts. Justifiable belief claims, on the other hand, are underpinned by a reasonable basis that is proportionate to the belief in question. These are 2 distinct gradations of certainty, and in this case, since the proposition is about belief, not knowledge, my burden is not one of demonstration, but of a reasonable basis that is proportionate to the belief being advanced. Second, the definition of evidence. Although we often truncate evidentiary considerations to physical terms, given that our immediate reality is mostly physical or entirely physical, depending on one's position, the term is broader. Evidence is anything that tends to make a proposition more or less probable than it would otherwise be without that evidence, including rational arguments. Third, and this is most critical perhaps in this foundational part of this opening statement, the definition of God. Here I will be advocating open deism, a neologism, not to be confused with open theism. Open deism defines God as a non-causal source of existence, distinguished from Enlightenment-era deism most critically in the absence of attributing a mind to God. However, my argument will include agency, which should not be equated to a mind. A mind is a mechanism for achieving agency. Agency itself is a distinct concept. Other than the term open deism, this is not an idiosyncratic stance. Various philosophical and religious positions do not ascribe a mind to the God concept, most notably the Ein Sof from Kabbalah, the Neoplatonist Plotinus and his notion of the One, Proclus and his continuation of henology, Spinoza's pantheistic monism, cosmological arguments from Sunni Islam, most notably the Kalam and its progeny. The God concept originates from the question of metaphysical ultimacy, its unifying notion across culture and religion being the fundamental principle or substance of reality. I present now the following arguments, which I've condensed into 3 syllogistic forms for clarity and terseness. The arguments are primarily inductive, with parts being deductive. Argument 1, existence. Premise 1, causality cannot originate existence, given that if a cause already exists, then existence already exists. Premise 2, if causality cannot originate existence, a non-causal source of existence exists or existed. Premise 3, if a non-causal source of existence existed, it is probable such source still exists, ceteris paribus. Conclusion, it is probable that a non-causal source of existence exists. Argument 2, infinite causal regress. Premise 1, infinite causal regress posits an infinity of predecessor causal states situated within either an infinite or finite span of time. Premise 2, infinite causal states within a finite span of time indicate convergence toward an initial state, since the time interval between causal states decrements as it regresses. An initial state is compatible with open deism. Premise 3, infinite causal states within an infinite span of time indicates some causal state A that is infinitely apart temporally from some other successor causal state B, given that an infinity of preceding causal states have already elapsed. Premise 4, irrespective of elapsed time, the successor causal state B in premise 3 never eventuates, given that at any point between causal state A and B, the elapsed time is always finite. Conclusion, an infinite causal regress situated within an infinite span of time yields a contradiction, given that it posits the existence of a successor causal state B, yet such causal state B never eventuates. Accordingly, an infinite causal regress situated within an infinite span of time is not a rational consideration. Argument 3, agency. Premise 1, agency is the capacity of a subject to produce an effect without such effect being causally determined by elements external to the subject. Premise 2, per argument number 2, if an infinite causal regress within an infinite span of time is irrational, then either an initial state or causal finitism are implicated as the origin of causal states. Both an initial state and causal finitism are compatible with the non-causal source of existence discussed in argument 1. Premise 3, a non-causal source of existence is, by definition, not causally determined by elements external to it. Conclusion, the non-causal source of existence identified in argument 1 has agency. On these bases, I submit that I have justified open deism. The claim advanced here is so minimal that it meets the standard laid out for justifiable belief. That is, it is proportional to the arguments I presented. This concludes my opening argument.
Let me know when I can.
Oh, wait, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, Bart, thank you for your opening argument. You still had 40 seconds on the clock. Now I'm going to allow for Cease to Know to do his 7-minute opening argument for the opposition to the affirmative. Give me 1 sec while I set the timer.
Sure.
And cease to note, you can start your opening statement right now.
Great. So firstly, thank you, Mr. Koku, for hosting the debate. Thank you to Bart for finally stepping up and doing this with me, and thank you for the judges and the audience for being here tonight. I have two aims in this debate. One is to show why Bart's argument fails to achieve his goal. I will do this by exposing the flaws of his argument as well as his fundamental misunderstandings of the language and these concepts. And the second aim is to provide my own arguments as to why the naturalist worldview succeeds where theism and deism both ultimately fail. Now, I was listening to Bart's opening, and I didn't actually hear a support of agency. I heard him state agency, but I didn't hear an inference as to from a non-causal state of agency. That's the first issue that I hear what he's saying. The other problem is that Bart faces is that he imagines paradoxes that don't actually exist. His entire concept of existential origin seems to me to be confused. He mistakes speaking about existence as though existence itself is a thing in the world instead of a mode of being or quality of beings. So to ask where does existence come from is just a nonsensical question to begin with. Everything he said here, first of all, another thing I want to add too is that agency isn't compatible with an intentionalist initial state. Everything he just described here in his view is compatible with atheism. It's compatible with a naturalist perspective. The naturalist is perfectly capable, and the atheist is perfectly capable of saying there is an initial state from which all other things are contingent on, but we make less assumptions. We don't inflate the ontologies. We don't add ideas about intentionality, ideas of mind. I don't know why Bart would claim that intentionality is somehow independent of mind. Maybe I misunderstood that, but it sounded like that's what he was saying, that maybe mind is a tool for intentionality, but that's the question, right? Like, why assume a extra ontologies, a disembodied mind with intentional states as an explanation required for understanding the natural world? It seems like we can all look at the same facts, and I'm just making one less assumption. And so what he's saying, what he calls open deism, especially if it doesn't possess a mind in the way that we classically try to think of the label of God, that is just going to be compatible with atheism. It's going to be compatible with naturalism. And yeah, so I'm just not getting where the inference is there from agency to there being this God. Another thing I want to address is this view of infinity. He says that if the universe had already existed, then every event has already occurred. This is just a common misconception about infinities. Here, Bart is confusing the mathematical concept of cardinality versus countability. The two are related, but they're not synonymous. Cardinality refers to the size or magnitude of a set, while countability refers to the ability to list the elements of a set in a definite order. All that's being said when one says the universe has always existed is that the set containing all past moments has cardinality, not that for every moment, that moment is a past moment. The former does not entail the latter. He also seems to think that having an infinite past entails some paradox of a causal loop. This makes absolutely no sense to me. The view that a set of past events is infinite is compatible with each member of that set being distinct. It doesn't mean that each moment is somehow simultaneously both the cause and the effect of the following moment. Think of a number line, for example, that stretches infinitely into the past. Each number on the line is still distinct from one another, the same way that each moment will still be distinct from one another on the arrow of time. There's no loop here. We're also describing a series ordered temporally here, not causally. So the talk of causation is just a red herring if the goal here is to justify premise 2 of Bart's argument. Bart seems to move between an idea of temporality to then causality as though they're synonymous. They're not. There's two different distinct concepts here. Another thing to point out is that if BART was right about infinity leading to these paradoxes, as he claims it does, we wouldn't be able to do mathematics in the first place. Instead, infinity is a fundamental aspect of mathematics. So yeah, there's nothing about, it seems like the deist and the atheist can both agree on an initial first cause. It's just that the deist is conflating his ontologies, his or her ontologies. And in doing so, their worldview suffers from less epistemic virtues. If you want to take, for example, a Bayesian approach to these conversations, the more ontologies you add, the less likely your view is to actually correspond to reality, therefore the least rational. Him and I can agree that the natural world seems to operate a certain kind of way. We could also agree that there is an initial state from which all other things are contingent upon. Why the need to then attribute intentional states to this first cause? It seems like BART is baking in the assumption that this God desires to create. He's baking in the assumption that the state requires intentionality. And all that this is doing is creating more questions than he has to come up with a just so story to explain. It's adding a price tag to the worldview, adding agency to this non-causal or to this initial state. I also seen a reason in that view why this God would have created one world versus another world. So he also is left with the question of answering how it is that God's nature is what it is, and why it is that God created the world that he created versus any other world. And ultimately, he's going to not be able to answer that question.
Okay, Cease. That would be
Yeah.
the end of your 7 minutes. But thank you for your
Perfect. Yeah.
opening argument. Now I'm going to allow for Bart, the affirmative, to have 4 minutes of a rebuttal to the opening argument of the opposition. This is the point where they do their initial rebuttals. So give me 1 sec. I'm going to put 4 minutes on the clock. And Bart, you can start your first initial rebuttal now.
Thank you, Ko, and thank you, Cease, for that opening, although I didn't hear any actual argument against the arguments I presented. You mentioned a variety of things, and I was trying to write them down as you were saying it. First of all, no inference for agency. I presented that inference. I defined agency as the capacity of a subject to produce an effect without such effect being causally determined by elements external to the subject. So if we're already granting, per the first syllogism, that a non-causal source of existence exists and it is not causally determined, which you agree to, then agency follows from that because there is no determinant to that act to create causal states. So that's just an inference, not necessarily deductive, but definitely an inference that follows from these premises. Not categorically, again, it's not an exercise in strict logic. You then mentioned that I imagine paradoxes. I'm not sure what exactly you're talking about. I explained to you why it is irrational to present an infinite causal state within an infinite span of time. You didn't actually address the argument, so I'm not sure where your opposition is. If you have an opposition to that argument, I invite you to present it. You also stated agency is not compatible with initial state. Maybe your view of initial state, right? But I explained why agency follows from the first and second arguments. If you already establish the existence of a non-causal source of existence, which is not causally determined, and you grant that this is the source of causal states, then per the definition of agency, that non-causal source of existence has agency. It follows from the definition of agency. And then you went on to say that I assume extra ontologies. I'm not sure what you mean by assume extra ontologies. I've assumed the bare minimum of what these arguments state. So there's nothing that's unjustified or that is just tacked on without justification, right? My goal here was to justify and present why open deism is the most rational position on the question of God. I did so, and I didn't hear you respond to those arguments. You said you make one less assumption. You can make as many less assumptions or as fewer assumptions as you like, but that doesn't mean that I've made an assumption or that I've failed to justify a point within my position. If you feel that I have failed, you have to present why I failed, not just say that I made an assumption. You also stated that every event has already occurred. I didn't even mention this. I think you're getting this from like an older position that I had. I never mentioned that every event has already occurred. Paradox of a causal loop. I did not mention causal loops. Again, I don't know what you were responding to, but it doesn't seem like it was the argument that I presented. You also mentioned that temporality and causality are synonymous, or rather that I hold them as synonymous. I don't. I don't know where you got that I hold them as synonymous. I never stated this or implied it. You stated that infinity is a fundamental aspect of mathematics. There's no problem with this. Infinity as a concept is perfectly fine as used in mathematics. That is distinct from claiming an infinite consummation of time or a physical infinity. So you're conflating these two subjects and not addressing the actual argument at hand. There's nothing at issue of using infinities in mathematics. That's not how I'm using them in my argument whatsoever. There's a distinction between the concept that's used in math, and the infinity that is supposed or presupposed with an infinite causal regress. Those are fundamentally distinct. And then you went on and said I added more ontologies. But again, like if you feel I added something that is unjustified, you have to make the argument that this is so. You just stated it. That's not an argument, and I reject that. And finally, again, I reaffirm that, or rather, you mentioned one last thing. I think that I have to explain God's nature or why God has created another world.
Your time
That's
is
not. Sorry,
your
I'll just
time
finish
is
10
up.
seconds. That's not the proposition in being debated. Cease. Sorry, see. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're good. I was gonna say your time ran out and then give you your last sentence, but you're good. Now I'm gonna give 4 minutes to the opposition to rebuttal the affirmative's opening statement or what he has said so far. So give me 1 second. And I'm gonna put 4 minutes on the clock. And cease to know, you can start right now. Go ahead.
I think I completely addressed your claims. Your definition of agency is a very strange one. I have no reason to accept the definition that agency is just uncaused cause of following states, right? Agency, as at least it's understood generally in the literature, relates to mind, relates to capacity to act, relates to a consciousness with desires and intentions. That is what is meant by agency in the literature. Now, if you want to define that as something else, that's fine. I mean, I don't think language possesses that kind of correctness, as long as you explain what it is you mean by agency. But what you're defining there is no different than the naturalist perspective, which says that I don't know why you would call that God, considering the baggage that term has. There's nothing about a first cause leading to all other things that suggests this first cause has a mind, has intentions. How do you differ your view from just causal dispositions that would be present in naturalism? That to me seems like you're just changing the subject. You're basically providing an argument for naturalism and then right at the end calling it something else. Now, as far as your claims about infinity, you're saying that there's a difference here in mathematical infinity, but there is a problem or contradiction in infinity in the context of the actual physical world. But one is describing the other, right? There's not this distinction. This is just something that I've not heard an argument in support of. I'm not just claiming that there's a problem in the way you're phrasing things. I provided an argument, both in terms of looking at mathematics, also in terms of looking at the way you're phrasing the very notion of existence and causality that leads to the problems that I have mentioned. Everything you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, is compatible with a view that does not hold the first cause to have a mind, to have intentions, it's just compatible with naturalism, in which case you're not actually defending a deist position, or you're calling naturalism deism at that point. It just doesn't make sense. It's just a misuse of the term agency in the way that it's generally used in the field. And so again, I think, I don't know how much time I have left, but I think the fundamental issue here is that there is no contradiction in an idea of a first cause. But what I mean by extra ontologies, and why my worldview is simpler, is that it doesn't require the assumption of a mind, which will lead to then having to explain why it is that God created the world that it created, as opposed to any other world. How there can be disembodied mind in the first place, for which we have no empirical priors to take seriously. You're adding extra. Your view leads, if you do think that this, what you're calling God has a mind, leads to more questions than it answers, and it leads to more ontologies than it is required in comparison to my worldview. If you're saying that God doesn't have a mind, well then why not just call it nature? At that point, your view is not distinct from mine. You're just arbitrarily calling it God without any actual good reason. So I'll leave it there.
And because Bart did, you can finish with one more sentence, and then we can move on. Or are you good?
The last thing I'll say one other thing. If this is a problem of semantics and not actually content in the worldview, well then I don't know that it's even an actual debate here. Like there's no an actual disagreement, other than calling it God. I mean, you basically you're saying it's rational to believe in naturalism, right?
Okay.
Like it's just a misuse of the terms.
And okay, so now we're going to move on to the surrebuttal of the affirmative. The affirmative can choose to surrebuttal the opposition. Bart, I'll give you 4 minutes on the clock. And then after your 4 minutes, there's going to be another surrebuttal from the opposition, which is cease. And then we'll take like a quick 3 minute and 30 second recess. Everyone can go stretch. Judges can think a little bit about what was said and, have a little bit of a break. So, Bart, I'm going to give you your 4 minutes right now. And you can start your surrebuttal right now.
Thank you, Ko. Again, Cease, I didn't hear any argument, again, any counter argument. You keep claiming that my position is compatible with naturalism. There's nothing within naturalism that commands or states an affirmative belief in a non-causal source of existence with agency. That's just rubbish. There's no equivalence there. You're essentially redefining naturalism to encompass everything that would include deism and even probably parts of theism, depending on how some open theists conceive of God. So that's just not a convincing counterpoint that you're making. You're essentially deflecting by banking on this wholesale encompassment or a definition of naturalism, and that's just not persuasive. I'm still waiting to hear for an actual argument against my position, which I presented in the opening. The agency definition, I presented it very clearly. It essentially derives from the typical argument of free will versus determinism. And if you agree with the point of ability to produce an effect without causal determinacy, then there's no issue with this definition. And you also went back to mind, but I didn't say a mind. A mind is a vestige of theism's personal deity. You don't have to construct a mind, whether it's disembodied or physical. The only thing that's necessary here for this position is agency, which is a conceptual position. It doesn't have to be expressed necessarily through the mechanism of a mind. Again, that's a vestige of theism's personal deity, and I'm advocating open deism, not theism. And you stated, I think also, as long as you can explain agency, I presented the argument, and I did not hear any rebuttal from you, aside again from conflating naturalism with deism. It just doesn't make any sense to me why you would think this is a persuasive counterpoint. You also stated baggage that term has. That's not an argument. Just because there's things that are associated with a term, that's not remotely an argument against using the term God. I provided sources, particularly the Einsaf, that explains why this definition of God is valid and historically persuasive. Just because theism has dominated a definition does not mean that there's no validity in this particular idea. We use terms that have technical or have popular meanings. For example, a raspberry and a strawberry are not berries. They're not botanically berries, right? But we call them berries. So this idea that like the popular definition has to be the exclusive sole definition, that's just rubbish. It's not an argument. It's a deflection. So I don't understand why that would even be considered. And then you also stated that there's no distinction in a physical or real infinity versus the concept of infinity in math. I think every mathematician would disagree with you on that. I think there's a categorical distinction between claiming a physical or a real elapsed infinity of causal states versus the concept of infinity as used in math. That just seems extremely outlandish and bizarre to me that you would even claim that. So again, there's no argument here that you've presented to counter the points that I made. I would love to hear it if you have one. I'm not sure if you want me to repeat some of the premises. We can discuss those, but you keep equating naturalism with deism without an argument to explain why you're doing so. And you also stated that I'm making all kinds of additional ontological assumptions and that my position has baggage. I'm not making any additional assumptions that I can't justify. That's why I presented the arguments for them. If you disagree that those arguments are valid, your burden is to explain why. You can't just say you're making assumptions. That's not an argument and it's not valid, and I reject that.
Whenever you said reject that, you had like 5 seconds left, so you ended at the perfect time. So that was Bart's Sir rebuttal. Now we're gonna move on to Cease's Sir rebuttal to anything that Bart has said. It will be your response.
Sure.
Give
Yeah,
me 1 sec.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm ready.
Oh, okay. And then let me set the timer. And you have 4 minutes, just like Bart did, and you can start right now.
Sure. So it's not me who's redefining terms, right? It's Bart who's redefining agency in a context that doesn't actually make any sense. To define agency as the ability to produce an effect doesn't entail a mind. Agency entails intentional states. Otherwise, that definition of agency is compatible with causal dispositions like, a glass shattering on the ground. That doesn't cash out in the way that agency is used in the literature. I would ask Bart to provide what are the necessary and sufficient conditions for his view of agency. His view makes no relevant symmetry between a rock and agency. When I think of agency, I understand it to mean the capacity to make choices, the capacity to have desires, the capacity to have intentional states, right? And that is the way that, I didn't mention theism, I'm referring to deism. That is, the classical view of deism is some uncaused cause with a mind that has intentional states. Agency being a reflection and a projection of those intentional states. So the reason why I'm saying that you are adding extra ontologies is because you've provided no argument as to why we should believe in a disembodied mind, or we should think that the kind of agency you've described is in any way separate from naturalism. I'm not redefining naturalism to include all other positions. The deist position classically views the initial source, the foundation of reality, as a mind. It just thinks that it doesn't care about what we do in bed, right? So it doesn't have a personal relationship with us, but it does view this original source as an agent. Whereas what you're describing is just an uncaused cause leading to contingent things or changes in the world. That is naturalism. That is completely compatible with an opulent view of naturalism. that agrees with the idea that there's a first cause, but doesn't apply intentional states or agency or desires to that state. So I don't think it's me that's redefining terms. I think it's you. As far as the mathematics, again, I don't see what the distinction in terms of the conceptual distinction is between infinity used in mathematics and what you're claiming is a problem of infinity in the real world. I'm not sure how you're drawing the distinction. I don't know how much time I have left, but I just say it again. It's BART, I think, here is playing the language to try to sneak a notion of deism, even though he's redefining deism, in a worldview that is actually just atheism and naturalism. You redefine agency in a way that actually doesn't cash out as being a relevant distinction from just what the naturalist is going to point to. So, how much time do I have left?
As of now, you have 10, 9, 8, 7.
Yeah, I'll leave it there.
All right. Thank you for that, sir, rebuttal. Both of them were amazing. Both Bart and Cease to Know, your opening arguments, your rebuttals, and your sir rebuttals, both were very intelligent, very amazing. Now, we're just gonna take like a little break for the judges to like think about like everything that they've heard, for the audience to think about everything that they've heard. If you want to continue watching the debate, please stay in the live and just take a break, go get some food, go get some like something to drink, and just 3 minutes and 30 seconds, everyone can stretch. But I'm starting the timer right now. Also, if you guys want me to like cut the time short for the break, just like let me know. If anyone wants to like quickly swap with somebody who's in the audience to let them come up and speak for a little bit while we're having our break, maybe we could do that. But it depends. Cease to Know and Bart, do you have problems with that?
Could you say that again? The last thing you said?
Yeah, what'd you say, Ko? Sorry.
Actually, let's just write out the break. That'll probably be better.
Would it be inappropriate for us to ask questions regarding what they said, or should we just sort of keep that to ourselves?
Actually, you can. Actually, during the break, yeah, go ahead and ask questions to the debaters, the judges to the debaters. We can do that right now. Go ahead.
Will we ask questions about what they've already said, or?
Yeah, what they've already said. Yeah.
I just want to clarify. It seems to me that the way Bart is using agency is to mean an uncaused cause that isn't determined. In the same way that maybe a compatibilist would view free will. Bart, is that how you're using the word agency?
Sorry, sir. Yes, that is largely where the definition derives. Agency is the capacity of a subject to produce an effect without such effect being causally determined by elements external to that subject. So if we applied this to the free will determinism debate, generally anybody who is in that debate would agree that free will exists per that definition. So that's where I'm deriving agency from.
And you're saying that oh, sorry, go ahead, Cease.
Again, as I was trying to clarify earlier, that entails, if you're talking about subjects, that entails subjects have a mind, right? Which again is another ontology you're adding onto your worldview.
I'm using subject as a general placeholder here. I'm referring to the non-causal source of existence.
Let's say this for the cross. I just wanted to.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay.
I just wanted to get an idea what he meant by agency, and then I was just going to ask Cease real quick. You don't think that's distinct from a mind, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that the way he's using agency doesn't make any sense. Like if we want to talk about first causes that are not themselves caused, leading to everything else, that is perfectly compatible with atheism and naturalism, right? Usually, as I've understood the concept of agency, it is dependent on a subject, a mind, a being that has intentional states. That is how the concept of agency is understood, not just as something that's not caused, right? So So he just conflating. This is just a confusion of language.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
But you don't
Can I respond
think
to that, or do you want me to save that?
Save it for the cross
The closing.
examination.
Okay.
okay. All right, I'll go
I,
on.
I did have another question as one of the judges, if I could.
Yep, go ahead. Yeah.
And this is particularly for Bart. Bart, did you define what we are meaning by rationality in terms of the proposition?
Implicitly so, yes. So when I distinguish between knowledge and justifiable knowledge and justifiable belief, so if somebody is presenting or advancing a justifiable knowledge claim, then they would be tasked with demonstrating that claim. If somebody is advancing a justifiable belief claim, as I am here, then they would be tasked with presenting a reasonable basis that is proportionate to the claim being advanced. So to land the plane, a rational belief is one that has a reasonable basis proportionate to the belief in question. And that will vary from belief to belief. There's similarly to how in law, there's no actual clear definition of what reasonable doubt means. It will vary from circumstances to circumstance depending on what the belief is and what the evidence available for the belief is.
And let me jump in real quick. The time for the break has ended. I'll probably let Average Justin be the last question. Or Average Justin, was there anything you want to add really quick before we move on?
No, sir. That was good enough for me. Thanks, Bart.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
for sure.
so at this time we're gonna do the affirmatives expanded argument. He's gonna get 4 minutes, and then we're gonna do a 7-minute cross-examination. Then we're going to have the opposition's expanded argument for 4 minutes, and then a 7-minute cross-examination, and then another recess where I think I'm just gonna have the judges feel free to ask the debaters any questions. So I'm going to set the timer for 4 minutes, and Bart, you can start your expanded argument right now.
Thank you, Co. The impetus for introducing the neologism open deism is to counteract the anchoring bias that is generally associated with the term God. Religious monopoly of the term, particularly in the West, has anthropomorphized more or less the originating God concept into an array of attributes and histories, including mental processes, including attributing a mind, right? Each one of these attributes and histories must be substantiated if the belief in them is to be reasonable. And if I felt I could do so, I would probably be a Christian or a Muslim or a practicing Jew. But I don't believe I can, and I also don't believe anybody else has up to this point. But this does not defeat the fact that the God concept stems from the question of metaphysical ultimacy, the notion of a hypostasis or a monad, right? A fundamental existential principle that, unlike most or even all religions, does not depend on any scripture or authority. There are countless examples of terms whose popular conception is de facto segregated from its technical or broader meaning. And I already mentioned the example of strawberries and raspberries not being berries in the botanical sense, even though they're generally considered berries in the conventional sense. So the first argument I presented in my opening establishes ontological credence, the probability of a non-causal source of existence existing. The second and third arguments establish the agency attribute per a rejection of infinite causal regress and the definition of agency, respectively, which, as I explained, flows from the free will determinism paradigm, ability to produce an effect without causal determination. Recall the standard, by the way, that I laid out for justifiable beliefs, a reasonable basis that is proportional to the belief in question. Here, the belief being advocated is the existence of a non-causal source with agency. Infinite causal regress within an infinite span of time presupposes the consummation of an infinity, which leads to an apparent contradiction, which I explained in my initial argument. That's the distinction between mathematical conceptions of infinity and this consummation of elapsed infinity. There is a categorical distinction here, and I'm not sure exactly where CEASE is seeing or conflating the two. So unless my opponent presents a resolution to the contradictions presented in argument 2 and claims that an infinite causal regress is in fact rational, then there's no basis for considering the counterpoint, because there really is no counterpoint being made. The closest I think CEASE has come so far is to state that my position is compatible with atheism and naturalism, but there's nothing within atheism and naturalism that affirm a belief in a non-causal source of existence with agency. And on the matter of agency, it actually doesn't really matter too much if CEASE wants to call it a mind. I'm calling it an agency because it's a broader conceptual frame that I derive from the syllogisms I presented. It doesn't really matter that much what the term used there is. The point is that it is distinct from atheism and naturalism. There is nothing within atheism and naturalism that affirms this belief. It is the affirmation of this belief that distinguishes my position from general atheism or naturalism, right? And this is what CEASE's burden is to respond to, and I haven't heard him respond to this.
Is that the end of your statement?
All done on the expanded argument, Co. Yep.
Okay, so right now we're gonna do 7 minutes of open cross-examination. So yeah, you guys can just like go at it with each other. It's gonna get a little bit feisty and rough, but like yeah, you guys can start cross-examination right now.
Yes, so let me start by saying that I provided a response to his claims about paradoxes. I provided a response that shows why BART is confusing this idea of accountability.
CEASE, can you restate my paradoxes? If you okay, which paradoxes that I did not actually use the word paradox. I said there's a contradiction that occurs specifically with infinite causal regress under an infinite span of time. So what is your response? You said you provided a response to that. I did not hear it. Can you please provide it again?
Sure. I provide two responses. One is that you claim there is a contradiction, but you haven't actually provided a contradiction. And two, when you attempted to provide a contradiction, or we're using kind of a perspective to try to push the narrative that way, you confuse the concept of cardinality versus accountability. But I don't need to believe in an infinite regress, right? That is a view that I don't think leads to a contradiction, but I don't have to have the view, right? You're saying that there's this,
I understand
that naturalism. Okay, so but you can be.
No, I understand, but I'm not saying that you're holding the view of infinite regress. It's a necessary argument for me to make, because if that is a rational election, then I cannot in good faith claim that my position is more rational. I need a symmetry breaker. That is why I've provided that argument. And you stated that I did not provide a contradiction. I did. I can repeat it. Infinite causal states. Infinite causal states, and you mentioned cardinality and countability. That really has nothing to do with this contradiction that I'm getting at here. It has everything to do with it. Well, if you can explain that'd be great, because you've just asserted that, but you haven't actually stated why there's any resolution based off of cardinality and countability. So I'll repeat the premise here. Infinite causal states. Okay, so if you imagine if an infinite causal regression already presupposes an elapsed infinity of causal states, and if you're contextualizing this within an infinite span of time, then you're presupposing, or rather stating, that there exist two existential states that are infinitely apart temporally. So this is what leads to the contradiction, because you're stating that they both exist. Yet if you proceed or traverse from A to B, any point along that line to B is always going to be finite. You never reach B. So you end up with this contradiction where you're simultaneously claiming a successor state B exists, yet it never eventuates. This has nothing to do with cardinality or...
this is just... No, it does. It does.
It really does. But go ahead.
I'll explain why. You're confusing the concept of infinity here. I'm not claiming that for every moment itself is infinite. I'm claiming the chain between moment to moment is what may be infinite in that view, which, by the way, I don't even hold, right? But that view is not suggesting that there is an infinite space between each moment that cannot possibly be traversed. That's not the way in which people use.
I'm not claiming that either. I'm not claiming that either. I'm claiming that if you...
You just
No.
mentioned
I
that.
didn't say there's a infinite moment between. I said there's an infinite. If you're already presupposing, right, which is what infinite causal regression does, it presupposes this elapsement of infinite causal states. That's already granted in this view. If you're rejecting
No,
that,
that's
then
not.
you're rejecting infinite regression, is what
No,
I'm
that's not
saying.
true. That's just not true.
It is. It
You
is.
it
Yeah.
isn't.
If you're claiming infinite causal regress, you're claiming that there's an infinity of causal states that precede the present. Unless you're even under B series of time, right? Because B series does not actually deny that there's an ordering; it just denies the presentism of A series. So you're not actually presenting you're not presenting an argument against this.
No, you are completely defining the notion of infinity. You're strawmanning essentially the notion of
How?
infinity in this, because you're
How? What do you?
expressing a concern about traversing time, whereas all that's being said. First of all, there are two distinct concepts here. There is a chain of causality, and there is a chain of temporality. Both are distinct. Neither lead to contradiction. They only lead to contradiction when you
You-
define terms in a way that is completely backwards.
See, you're
Um,
you're making just claims. Okay, you're making claims that don't address the argument I put forward. So I'm not understanding what your objection is to this. If you don't, I understand this isn't your position, but you're not putting forward an argument that would address what I've just explained regarding the.
no, would you? But I am. What the argument is that you are defining infinity incorrectly. You're misunderstanding what people mean when you talk about an infinite
No,
regress.
but you're just making a claim. See, you're making
No,
this
it's not
claim, but
true.
you're not actually making an argument to back it up. So if you can do that, I would appreciate it, so I
But
can have
what
something to
is
respond to.
no, but what is the argument on your side to say that the only way to conceive of an infinity is to claim something about the traversion from each moment to moment? Like
I'm claiming
this is
that
why I
this
mentioned.
is the
I
infinite
made the
causal
argument.
regress. Sorry, go ahead.
So when I mentioned and I compared the concept of cardinality versus countability, that was to show that the way you're framing infinity is confused. But I want to just focus on one thing.
But you're not making an argument, Cease. I'm not.
Well, I'll
You
leave it.
keep
I'll leave it
repeating
to.
cardinality and accountability, but
I'll leave
there's
it to the judges to see whether or not they've heard a response to what you said. But I want to point to something that I think is more important, right? Because I don't personally hold to an infinite regress view. I hold to the idea of a first cause, right? What I don't do is apply your definition of agency to this first cause.
okay. But why would you
I'm yet
not?
to hear an argument as to why this first cause requires an agency.
Okay,
And
so I've
you would
explained
have to
this,
go
and I'll
to
explain
make
it
that
again.
distinct from naturalism. You
If
would have
you're
to provide.
Yeah,
So again, let me just ask
if
you.
you're yeah, well, let me just respond to that, because I've explained why it's distinct from naturalism. Because if there's nothing in naturalism that establishes an affirmative belief of a non-causal source of existence with agency, and I've explained why I've defined agency like this. It's a standard derivative from the free will versus determinism debate, and all you've said is that you reject this definition, but you have no basis to reject it, because if something can produce an effect without such effect being causally determined, there is no bar to calling that agency. If you want to call that a mind, if you want to situate that within a mind, be my guest. I'm not going to stop you.
No,
But
but
there's
this is bad. You have the burden proof confused here. If you're going to say, I can agree that there is a first
Finish your
cause.
sentence, Cease. Finish your
Yeah,
sentence, but that's the end.
yeah. So again, it is on you to show that agency you said free will. Well, free will implies an agent with intentional states, with a consciousness, with a mind, making decisions.
analogy. It's an analogy,
But
Cease.
it is what the concept entails as used in the literature. So
No,
if
it's
by agency you
just
just
an
mean,
analogy.
if by
Okay,
agency you just
really quick, Cease. Let me let Bart get one more sentence, and then go ahead, Bart.
No. Cease. Go ahead. Finish. I said my
sure.
point was that I'm just making an analogy. I'm not saying that the free will position is directly applicable to non-causal source of existence, because it's an analogy. It's not directly applicable as far as like the terms.
Again, the way you define agency is not outside of a naturalist worldview, because all you're doing there is
I
saying
disagree.
something that's uncaused.
I haven't heard
leads
any
to
argument for
changes.
this.
And then let's move on. Cease. Now you're gonna get 4 minutes to do your expanded argument, and then we're gonna have 7 more minutes of cross examination.
Wait, I
So
thought we just did that.
Bart did his 4 minutes and then cross examination, and then now you're gonna do your 4 minutes and cross
Oh,
examination.
okay, sure. Yeah.
And
So again, I
uh,
don't think I'm gonna need 4 minutes.
okay, yeah, you
But
can just tell me, and then we can cut it early.
yeah. Look, I'll just have to. I'm sorry to sound like a broken record here, but I'm just gonna have to explain this again.
Okay.
Agency entails a mind. It entails a consciousness. It entails desires. That is the way in which the concept of agency is used when we're talking about deism, theism, subjects. That's the way in which that term is used. There is nothing about naturalism that doesn't account for an initial first cause that is uncaused, leading to changes, leading to contingent things following and succeeding from that first cause. That is, in fact, for example, Graham Oppy's defense of naturalism. He says, yeah, the theist or the deist and the atheist can agree on an initial first cause, but what the atheist doesn't need to do is conflate their ontologies, make their view more likely to be incorrect under a Bayesian approach, and add other assumptions that are not required in the worldview. This is why I say that his worldview is more irrational, and my view is the more rational, because I'm not equivocating on terms. I'm not using terms that have a unnecessary baggage, and I'm not misrepresenting what these concepts are, how these concepts are defined. Again, to talk about a rock having agency is basically what Barth seems to be doing. He's saying that something that is, or that initial, that you could have something that you would call God that would somehow lack a mind, but still be separable from just nature. To me, it doesn't make any sense. It seems like you're just calling what the naturalist says is nature, you're just calling that God, in which case there is no, you're not providing an argument for deism. You're calling naturalism deism without any reason to do that. It just doesn't make any sense to take that move and play with language that way. You've also, again, I've asked you for an argument for agency, and all you've done is provide a definition which seems perfectly compatible with an atheist worldview. So I don't. 1 second it seems like you're arguing for a mind when you use analogies of free will, and then the next minute you're saying no, a mind isn't required, and yet somehow deism without a mind is conceptually distinguishable from naturalism. That doesn't make any sense. I would just ask you what the necessary and sufficient conditions are for agency in your worldview, because I don't think that definition is at all clear. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay, thank you for that expanded argument. And now I'm going to set the timer for 7 minutes, and you guys can do another cross-examination. You can start right now.
Okay, yeah, see, again, you keep saying this doesn't make sense to you, that doesn't make sense to you, that I'm conflating naturalism with deism, but I've explained the terms, I've explained the argument, and you seem to have this all-encompassing definition of naturalism that essentially just pushes these arguments aside and doesn't respond to them. I mean, for example, where did you get from my argument, right, that a rock would have agency? I mean, a rock is causally determined, right? That's the distinction. By the way, this is like the cross, so feel free to jump in here and interrupt me. That's the distinction, right, between the non-causal source of existence, which is not causally determined, and the rock, or even us, right? Since I fall more on the line of determinism, we would be causally determined. So under this worldview, it would be compatible with a determinist position. And
you keep saying, sorry, but you keep saying that I'm not addressing your arguments. I've addressed every single thing you've said. right?
You haven't. You said it
What I'm
doesn't make sense, and I'm not
no,
here
but I'm
like
explaining why it doesn't make sense. I'm explaining why it
I
doesn't make
haven't.
sense. I'm saying it doesn't make
You've
sense
explained by saying that I'm
mathematically.
conflating naturalism with deism, and I'm telling you I'm not. There's where in naturalism or deism is there an affirmative belief in a non-causal source of existence with agency? There's nothing like that.
But again,
That doesn't
so
make any sense.
okay, provide your definition of agency again.
Okay, so here's the definition. This was in argument 3. Agency is the
Mhm.
capacity of a subject to produce an effect without such effect being causally determined by elements external to the subject.
Define subject.
Subject is anything in question producing the effect. So in this case, since we're talking
Oh.
clearly about the non-causal source of existence, this is what I'm getting at, right? Like it's the word subject is just a placeholder, Cease. It doesn't have to mean that it's something typical of the theistic position,
It's a
right? So
but hold on a
don't
second.
confuse it for that.
But hold on a second. To just say it's a placeholder, if you're going to make a statement, you have to have your terms clarified, right?
I just clarified it, right? So I'm answering
said,
you. A subject.
but no,
Okay, I'll answer again. A subject is the non-causal source of existence. That's the subject in question here.
Okay, again, why would that be different than the naturalistic initial state?
How?
Right?
Okay,
I can arrive at the initial state.
That's not the naturalistic initial state. The naturalistic, first of all,
Sure.
the naturalistic initial state doesn't claim a mind or agency. There's nothing like that. Even if you grant,
when I ask you to explain your definition of agency as not including or suggesting a mind, your answer was subject. So when I try to clarify, what do you mean by subject?
No, I didn't. That's okay. So you're
We all
conflating.
heard it.
No.
What are you talking about?
Okay, so again, let me explain. Subject refers to the source of the effect. The mind question was the mechanism. So you said agency entails mind. No, mind entails agency. You got it reversed. If you want to claim mind, I really have no qualms with that. But the point is that agency is a distinct concept. It's a broader concept. The mind implies mental mechanisms and processes that we're familiar with. And that
in what way is naturalism failing to provide, under that definition of agency, an explanation for why existence is what it is?
No, because this is the belief, the affirmative belief, that a non-causal source of existence exists and that it has agency. Naturalism by itself has nothing that mandates any such belief. You're misunderstanding the idea of naturalism versus the affirmation of a belief that is derived.
Not at all. That naturalism, in fact,
you are.
Naturalism is stating the idea that the natural world, at least under the view that I'm describing, Graham Oppy's particular view of naturalism, defense of naturalism, is the idea that we have an initial first state, which I would call metaphysically necessary, from the understanding that the concept of nothingness is actually incoherent, and that therefore this initial first state functions exactly as you described it, as an uncaused.
No, that's you can have the uncaused initial state. That's fine. Actually, in some versions of open deism, that alone might be sufficient, right, for the definition of God. But if you go back to the Ein Sof from Kabbalah, right, that's a
But
concept.
you just said a second ago. You just contradicted yourself. You said a minute ago that.
I'm just saying. No, cease. I'm not contradicting myself. I'm giving you an example. That's not the position I'm defending. The point I'm trying to make is that like no Oppian position would claim agency there. It doesn't make any sense. So you're expanding.
No. Under your really backwards definition of agency.
It's not backwards. It's the basic free will versus determinism distinction.
Again, free will and determinism imply a mind, right? Under your definition,
Cease. You're conflating an analogy with your. Okay, go ahead.
Well, let me just respond to what you said. So, under your definition of agency, under one definition of agency, because I actually think you're providing contradictory definitions of agency all throughout this entire.
Where have I contradicted the definition? You asked me for the necessary and sufficient conditions, and I explained to you that that's the necessary and sufficient condition, being able to produce an effect without causal determination.
Yeah, so that definition, the capacity to provide an effect without being... Say it again? Say it again?
The capacity to produce an effect without such effect being causally determined by elements external to the subject.
Yeah, so again, you would have to explain... So that right there, how you would connect one causing the other if there isn't that link,
Because
That
it's non-causal. That's the distinction. It's a
right, but
non-causal source of existence. So it doesn't operate causally, but it can cause. And since we agree that this is the source of causal states, right? We agree here that this is the source of causal states, right? And you're saying, or rather you're disagreeing that the ability of this thing to cause whatever you want to call it, if you don't want to call it a non-causal source, you're saying that the ability of this thing to cause causal states without itself being causally determined is not agency. And that's just not accepting the basic definition that
hold on.
essentially
Is
any
the
person would accept,
wait, is the
especially in the free will
principle? Oh, now I'm
determinism
confused
debate.
even more because is the initial state under your worldview causing the following states, or is it not?
Well, it's the source, right? So it's the causal origin. Correct.
Okay, so it does cause it. So that initial state does cause it.
It's not caused. It's okay. The states
So it's
that
a
are
source, but it's
caused are
not a
caused. It itself is non-causal. Do you understand?
Finish your
no,
final
I understand. No,
sentences.
yes, the original state itself is not caused. That
Correct.
wasn't my question. I agree. The naturalists can agree with that proposition when talking
Right.
about the initial state. The question is the initial state the origin of all other states? That's
As far as far as a causal system, yes, this would be the
perfect.
belief.
This is
Correct.
perfectly compatible with naturalism.
It's not compatible because there's agency involved, and that's what differentiates it from a naturalist position.
But when
Not
I
at
ask
all
you,
compatible.
but when I ask you to
It's
define
not.
what you mean by agency,
Oh,
you
I've
just say
stated.
a
Cease,
non-causal.
I've stated it 3 times. I can repeat the definition
Yes,
once more if you like.
but I'm telling you,
Okay, guys,
I'm
I'll
recalling
probably
you.
cut it off right here.
Okay,
This
it's just absurd.
so we're gonna do 3 minutes and 30 seconds of recess, and basically the judges can ask you any questions that they want to clarify certain things. But here, let me set the timer right now. And yeah, recess. Judges can talk to you.
I have one question.
I have one question.
There's also a feedback. I'm not sure what that's about, but Bart, if I were to sum up, you tell me if this makes sense, right? And I'm trying to just understand if I took this down correctly. A non-causal source of existence with agency but no mind. Is that accurate?
The first part is accurate. I'm not actually affirming that it does not have a mind. It's just not something that is necessary to the position. So, correct.
A mind is not necessary to the position.
It's not necessary to
Okay,
the
so a
position because yeah, correct.
non-causal source of agents, a non-causal source of existence with agency, but does not necessarily have a mind.
Correct. And the reason for that is because a mind is a mechanism for agency. It's not necessarily exhaustive of how agency, it's largely a vestige of theism's personal deity. So open deism, it does not track that. It derives simply from it applies simply the concept of agency. And whether or not this is actualized through a mind is not something that is necessary to the argument.
2 minutes.
Thanks.
I have a question for Cease. Cease, what is your definition of naturalism?
Yeah. So the way I'm describing it is that there is the physical world, and that this physical world follows certain laws. I hold to the position of Oppie's view, which is that the theist, deist, and atheist can all agree on a metaphysically necessary initial state, right? That there is a first cause that leads to all other things. The difference between the atheist and the naturalist in comparison to the deist and the theist is that the atheist worldview is making less assumptions. It's not assuming a mind, it's not assuming desires, it's not assuming intentional states. It's just viewing reality as nature functioning in a certain kind of way. And so this is distinct from the, I think, the religious position. So when I'll say something else in the closing statements, but yeah, that would be my answer.
44 seconds. Any other questions from any other judges? Everyone's good? Okay.
That's good.
You got like 20 seconds. You guys want to forfeit it?
I had a question, but I didn't have enough time for any of it, so it's fine.
Go ahead.
Oh, actually, yeah, go ahead. You'll be the last question.
Okay. Just really quickly, I'm trying to understand. I get Cease what you're talking about. I just want to know like where you draw the distinction between what would fall into this category of naturalism versus deism. What was missing in the argument that you're just not seeing?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Sorry, can you ask the question again. What is missing from what?
Okay, in the argument, what was missing to actually place what Bart's talking about from deism that places it into naturalism?
Yeah, so look, like I said, there's nothing about the idea of an initial first cause leading to all other states of existence that requires a mind or intentional states. That is the notion that is connected with the concept of agency, the concept of free will, is the idea that there is a mind making decisions, right? So when Barth says that naturalism fails to address agency, but then he defines agency as the capacity for a non-caused initial cause to lead to all other states, that is exactly what naturalism is stating. That is exactly what the picture of modern physics is describing, is that there is nature, and nature functions in this kind of way, and there is a causal link of sorts, and that's it. And so this, to me, it seems like this is just a confusion of terms that Barth is engaging with. And to talk about agency without mind, I think is just completely confused.
I'll end it there. So now we're in like the final section. Basically, Cease, you're going to start with 4 minutes to issue your closing argument. Bart, you're going to issue your closing argument, and both Bart and Cease have agreed to allow Cease to end with a 1 minute rebuttal. From then, we will do questions from the audience. I think I'm going to drop the judges from the panel and bring up people to ask one question each to the debaters. And then when the judges are finished with deciding who they think won the debate, you guys can comment like done below, and then I'll bring you guys back up, and then we'll say who won by judge's decision. But yeah, let's start off with Cease, your closing argument, and you can start now.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, host, again, for having this debate. Thank you, Bart, for joining us tonight and engaging in this conversation. And thank you for the judges for giving their time, and for the audience for listening to the conversation. My closing statement is the following. I think that Bart has failed to provide the contradictions that he claimed exist. What he has shown is just a confusion of concepts. This idea that infinity leads to these problems only exists if you buy into his premises about traversing time, right? And I provided a view of infinity that bypasses those concerns and deals with those concerns and resolves those concerns. Secondly, his view, as he's described, as he has defined agency in this very weird way, is not only compatible with naturalism, but actually what naturalism is suggesting. At least the obvious view of naturalism certainly is that view, which you have a metaphysically necessary state that leads to all other things and has the capacity to cause all other things, but it is itself not caused. Why call this God? Why use the term agency, which is usually connected with the idea of mind and intentional states and decisions? That to me is irrational. The reason why I mentioned definitions before is because words have baggage, and it is irrational and counterproductive to use the label of God when you're really describing something that is perfectly compatible with an atheistic and naturalist perspective. And I want to point to one last thing about this idea of nothingness, why the idea of an initial first state is rational, is that nothingness is a relative term. Like if I look at if I say there's no food in the fridge or there's no fuel in the car, something along those lines, I'm talking about a lack thereof in a relative relationship, right? No food in relation to the fridge. But a concept of complete nothingness is actually incoherent. You can't imagine it. And so it isn't a presupposition for the naturalist to view the idea of a first cause that always has been, in a sense, irrational or contradictory or paradoxical, because you couldn't have nothingness. Now, I think that what Barth is confusing is different ideas of philosophy of time, perhaps. Like, what does it mean when we use the word always? Or how do we talk about traversing of time? Or how do we measure this change both temporally and causally? I would argue that none of these views lead to the contradictions or paradoxes that Barth has claimed exist. He's just confused about the terms. And he said, I never responded to his idea of infinity. I responded in detail. I explained the concept of cardinality versus countability, why that's not a contradiction in mathematics, and why that would translate, when looking at the physical universe, into an idea of infinity that doesn't lead to a contradiction. I've also said that there are other views outside of a concern about infinity that is not itself contradictory. It makes the same assumptions or conclusions, I should say, not assumptions, that the theist and the deist makes as far as there being a first cause, but doesn't add on top of that unnecessary ontologies, disembodied minds, intentional states, desires. And so this is why the naturalistic perspective is more rational. And to me, it sounds like Barth is unsure about the mind. He keeps switching off whether it has a mind or it doesn't have a mind. His view, as he's described it, is completely compatible with naturalism. He's just calling it something else for no good reason. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, and then now, Bart, this will be your time for your closing statements, and you can start right now.
Thank you, Co. And likewise, thank you to Cease and the judges for being here. The folks in the audience, really appreciate y'all. And again, this is essentially taking what Cease is doing, which is expanding the definition of naturalism to include the deistic position that I've presented. He stated that modern physics is describing an uncaused source of existence with agency, and no part of modern physics makes this claim, or is it part of established physics. So this is a redefinition of naturalism to avoid addressing the arguments that have been presented. He stated that he resolved the infinite regress problem by stating cardinality and countability. At no point did he do so. He did state cardinality and countability, but this does not resolve the regress contradiction that I explained in the initial opening argument. He didn't present any argument to that effect. He just stated cardinality and countability and moved on. And this is the same way that the arguments that have been put forward to him have been addressed. He simply redefines naturalism to include this affirmative belief within a non-causal source of existence with agency. And that is not part of naturalism. Naturalism is the investigation, or rather the belief that the world is entirely subject to scientific investigation, right? And a non-causal source of existence is qualitatively distinct from causal states. We investigate causal states. So to claim from the outset, right, even taking aside the agency issue, that this is a naturalistic position is simply nonsensical. It's an assumption that is used to deflect from having no counter argument to the positions I presented. And that's essentially what Cease has been paraphrasing for the better part of an hour. He has not substantiated any counter argument that would defeat either the ontological position, the infinite regress position, or the agency position that I presented at the outset. He then brought up the concept of nothingness, which I never stated, and he also claimed that I was making unnecessary assumptions, but I'm not, right? Because every claim that has been put forward has been derivative of the three syllogistic forms that I presented at the outset. There's no unnecessary assumption that's being made here whatsoever. And as far as the label of God carrying baggage, again, that's not an argument. It's actually beneficial, I would say, to continue to use the label of God, because it addresses the God concept from where religious positions ultimately derive. So the use of this concept can actually demonstrate that some or all religions are actually taking this concept and reforming it in a way that's not rationally defensible. So I would claim that this is a reclamation of the concept to return it to its original conceptual origins. And with that said, again, my position here that I was tasked to substantiate is the belief in God is a rational position, and I have done so with the three syllogistic forms that I presented at the outset. At no point did Cease actually address the issues that were stated, including the position of agency, which is not part of a naturalistic paradigm. It's not an affirmation within naturalism, and it's definitely not an affirmation within atheism. And again, if there's any doubt remaining on the question of non-causal source of agency versus an infinite regression, well, my time ran out.
All right,
Thank
finish the sentence.
So I was going to repeat that at no point did Cease also address why an infinite causal regress would not be possible relative to his naturalistic initial state. So he does not provide a symmetry breaker for his position of an initial state or an assumed position of initial state. I did, right? I have a symmetry breaker. I provided why an infinite causal regress under an infinite span of time does lead to a contradiction. And the only thing he said to that was cardinality and countability, and that is not an argument. And I present to you that I have substantiated the proposition of this debate.
And thank you for those closing arguments. Cease, you're going to get 1 minute of a closing rebuttal, and then I'm going to drop all of the judges and open up like a Q&A for like the for the viewers. People who come up can ask like one question each, and then when the judges, all you got to do is comment done, 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 and then I'll bring you back up to issue the final scores. So Cease, you can start now.
Sure, I've addressed every single one of Bart's arguments, every single one. I didn't just state cardinality and countability and moved on. I explained in detail why he's confused about those concepts, leading him to believe in imaginary contradictions. And that is what I did. I didn't just state it and then moved on. Second, again, it's on me that's reframing the language. It's Bart. It is irrational to take a word that, like God, that has an incredible amount of baggage attached to it, and then change the content of the label to mean something completely different than the way it's used, at least in modern society, and then think that you're providing evidence for what people would reject. Most religious people would reject what you're describing. Now, the claim that naturalism doesn't address agency or doesn't address these concepts is just false. Graham Opping is the leading defender and one of the leading scholars on naturalism, and he expressed exactly my view, which is the initial state is not incompatible with naturalism. By the way, you can have a philosophically naturalist perspective and not necessarily be confined with any view of science, any particular view of science. You don't have to believe, for example, that science will answer all things in the future or something like that to still hold to naturalism. So it's not me that's redefining terms. It's Bart that's redefining terms in a very strange way, and then claiming that I've not answered arguments when I have. By the way, one last thing
already, Co. I think it's already over a minute.
Oh, I'm over. Okay.
Okay.
One last thing. Bart never provided any inference that
Wait, if you're going over a minute, I should.
Okay.
Can I get 10 seconds to respond to this?
Or I
I just
was
let you go.
I cut him off. I just told him finish your last sentence. So I was letting him finish his last sentence.
Sure.
Um,
My
and
last
No, Cece,
sentence
if
is
you want to
thank you,
finish it,
everybody.
if you're okay with me responding for 10 seconds based off like whatever you're going to say, go ahead.
No, I just say thank you, everybody, for having joined this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. I really appreciate it, you
I'll just
hosting
leave it.
this. Yeah.
okay, and then I'll probably have the judges drop, and I'll invite some people on so they can ask you two questions. But judges, stick around in the live. I will bring you back up to announce your scores after you've contemplated. And yeah, Admir, and then just Jim.
Hey Bart, hey
Love
Cease,
that.
what are you guys doing?
Hey, dear. Good to see you, man.
And yeah, I'm gonna bring up some peoples. Let's see. Joey.
Let's go. J Mike, let's go. Robbie, Joey.
Okay. And you guys can ask Bart and Cease questions about the debate.
Okay, I'll go first, and then because J Mike's two follow-up questions might very well be follow-ups to my two questions, so I'll go first. The first one is, so it sounded like a statement then a question. So it sounded like, Bart, what you're saying is that the way you're taking agency is just to be any type of cause that doesn't entail its effect. So it's going to be anything indeterminate. So my first question is, under that definition of agency, would a truly indeterminate die, or say something like quantum indeterminacy, be agency under the definition that you're using?
Or a Geiger counter.
If it matches the definition, right, which is the one I provided, and I'll read it off directly, so that it's not causally determined in any sense, then it would, right? But that's kind of like essentially you can make that argument and essentially say like, well, if a rock could act without causal determinacy, then a rock would have agency. Sure, yeah, a rock would have agency, but it doesn't, right? So the distinction is based off of like our understanding of causal determinacy or causal effect versus this qualitative distinction of a non-causal source.
Yeah, so then the follow-up question is, is an indeterminate die or quantum indeterminacy a natural thing or a non-natural thing?
Is an open question that I have not included within open deism. So I'm not sure if it would essentially like it's asking like, is this non-causal source of existence subject to naturalistic discovery or scientific discovery, right? And it's actually one of the arguments that I was considering making, because everything that we understand seems to be causally determined or at least causally affected in some way. So claiming that we could just apply this without any argument to justify why to a non-causal entity or source or whatever you want to term it, that seems to be a leap that needs justification and substantiation, and I wouldn't jump to that unless there's an argument to explain why that would be, right?
Just unclear if that was like a yes or no there.
I would not affirm the affirmative, but I can't say that it's definitively no. Does that answer your question?
So you're like not sure if like a dice roll or quantum indeterminacy is natural or non-natural.
If it's not something that's subject to scientific investigation, as far as like if we cannot understand its mechanisms or properties, then it wouldn't be. If we can understand that it exists, right, then that might be a different sort of ontological discovery and investigation. But as far as like understanding its mechanisms, which I think is that what you're getting at, right?
We can investigate these things using the natural sciences.
Oh, really quick. I just want to make sure it's like one question each. I think you're getting a bunch of questions, but I have to give it to other people.
Amdir, yeah, I'll just wrap it up. I'll say if you're granting that you can investigate it scientifically, naturalistically, then yes, it would be subject to that. Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
And then Bob by Blood, you want to go, and then we'll go J Mike, Joey, and then Rob. Go ahead, Bot.
Sure. So this would be my question to Bart. When we're talking about agency, not needing a mind, my question would just simply be, how would you describe a human's agency if humans have minds?
And thank you for your question, John. How would I describe a human? Well, I'm not sure I would grant that humans have agency if you're referring to, for example, a free will versus determinist sort of condition. Under this paradigm, under open deism, right, the only thing that would have agency would be this non-causal source of existence, assuming the causal states are necessarily successor states to predecessor causal states. So I wouldn't even know if there would be an answer to that, because it would presuppose under open deism that humans have agency. But if we grant any sort of causal effect or determination of their action, then they wouldn't, right?
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
No, I follow rules. I'm not AMDeer.
Okay. Jeremiah, you can go.
Yeah, I wasn't really like convinced that you derived a contradiction and an infinite past series of temporal events, and so I was wondering what the contradiction is derived from us existing and the proposition that there was infinite past series of temporal events.
Sure, I can try to summarize it, Mike. By the way, I've never asked you, like, are you okay with me calling you Mike, even though you're J Mike?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So, and again, these are presented in syllogistic form, but they're not necessarily deductive. They're inductive. I'm stating that they're inductive arguments. So the contradiction, right, that I was putting forward is that if you're operating within an infinite causal regress presupposition, or rather just granting that, and you're also granting that this infinite causal regress operates within an infinite span of time, right? Because you can have an infinite causal regress within a finite span of time, right? Like, between 0 and 2, for example, the natural numbers, you can subdivide them into an infinite number of natural numbers, and you can analogize that to causal states, but it's still a finite span of time, right? So which is not where the contradiction derives, although you could potentially apply that even there. So the contradiction that I was referencing is under an infinite span of time, you're already presupposing that an infinity of time has elapsed, or in this case, an infinity of causal states, and that supposes, right, that you have existential states that are infinitely apart from one another. So if you start traversing, right, this is where. Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like.
Sorry. Do you want me to continue?
Well, I don't see why they'd be infinitely apart, but there'd just be a past series of infinite temporal events.
That's what
right?
we're pointing to.
So,
This idea that there is,
Well, if you're just telling, so I guess because this is where I need clarification. You're saying it's inductive, so you're just conceding that you can't actually deduce the contradiction.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the deductive form would be syllogistically or would be valid, or rather, either valid or sound. So that's why I'm banking on the inductive position. But I can, again, like the idea is. Do you understand the idea that I'm putting forward? Right. So you're presupposing.
It's very interesting because I just take proof by contradiction to be deductive, right? And so if there's a contradiction, presumably that's a proof by deduction, right?
Yeah, I didn't have enough time to like kind of polish up the argument to make it deductively valid. So I just kind of put it into this inductive form for ease of presentation. So
I would say finish up real quick.
Well, all right, I'll leave it there. But I will say, you cannot polish a turd, is the old expression, Bart.
We can talk about it, J. Mike. I always value your input.
And Joey, do you have any questions for Cease or Bart?
Yeah, for Bart, I'm an agnostic. I'm open-minded to concepts of like maybe what you were arguing for, but I do have a question. Like, can you expand on what you meant when you said religions have sort of messed up the definition of what God is, and how you want to bring it back to an original concept that makes more sense? Like, how do you make sense of like there being even an original concept to begin with, or if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure if I used the terminology messed up. If I did, I may have overreached or meant to say something else. My point was that the God concept itself originates from metaphysical ultimacy, the question of what is ultimate. And generally, there's three categories of ultimacy. There's metaphysical, axiological, and soteriological. And here, obviously, I was advocating for a metaphysical ultimacy, which is essentially a fundamental principle or substance of existence by which existence originates or functions or is sustained. And from this concept, religions take and they adorn it with a host of attributes and manifestations and characteristics, depending on the religion, the culture, the environment, the time. And ultimately, they're advocating the same idea, the same concept, right? Because it's the same question of metaphysical ultimacy. And even if it's not called God in some traditions, like the Brahmin from Hinduism, or various other traditions that are not as familiar in the West, it's still the same basic idea. And that's why I brought up this notion of the Ein Sof in Kabbalah that I'm fond of, which is the God concept without any attributes or manifestations, no mind, no anthropomorphism, nothing of that sort. So my point is that this concept is what's defensible rationally, and anything that's built on top of that breaks this defense because it doesn't have the rational basis to sustain it, although religious people would certainly argue that it does. John, bought by blood, would maybe argue that there's evidence for miracles, so there is evidence to support Christianity or other religions, right? I'm not a Christian, so I wouldn't put forward that argument, but I can see where he's coming when he says that. But my idea, again, is to kind of restore or highlight this baseline fundamental concept that is at the core of religions that advocate or have a God belief. And I feel that this is actually beneficial and worthwhile because it can demonstrate that this idea conceptually is valid while distinguishing it from religions that have adorned it with things that might not be valid.
Okay. And then
So,
Thanks.
could I ask you just to elaborate in like layman's terms what you were saying, because I didn't follow through completely. The metaphysical version of God is the only version that you can conceptualize as being rational. Is that what you're saying?
That I can defend being rational. Yeah. So think of a car, right? So the God concept would be the wheel, and let's say Christianity would be a Toyota, Islam would be a Mercedes, etc.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I think I understood that you're right. So the only part of the concept of God is the metaphysical part, which is rational, that you agree with.
That's the part that I can justify rationally. If you start adding things, this is why I have an issue with calling it a mind, because a mind presents mental processes, and agency is broader. It's broader than a mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever terms we come to describing God is beyond, accurate, because we're in all essence a creation of said creator. So to formulate the right words in the creation's language, to me, just seems like a silly endeavor.
I guess I'll let Bart answer that, and then I'll let Robbie go.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Can you repeat
Like
that last part real quick?
I meant like creating a video game and then having the video game think in its limited understanding of its surroundings will be able to formulate in its own language what describes the inner workings of a god outside of
but that's exactly my point.
hypotheticals.
That's exactly my point. That's why I maintain that the most we can do on this subject is this position of open deism, which expresses a belief in a non-causal source of existence that has agency. That's the most I can rationalize. Anything else beyond that, I wouldn't be able to justify in good faith.
Yeah, having words to describe these things is our predicament, because we're going to fall short in whatever language we attempt to describe something that's literally almost indescribable. So yes, I can understand how people can have that view. I am Christian, so within my construct of reality and how I understand what God is and his word that it was given through people's thoughts, that's where most people, I guess, have a disconnect, is believing that people just came up with ideas and all kind of got together and wrote this book, versus godly ordained thoughts and messages came through them and weren't their own ideas. So that's where it completely falls apart, and I understand why most people don't give it credit because of that.
And then I'm probably gonna move
Yep.
on to Robbie, and then Robbie, and then not the real Dwight, and then I'll probably bring the judges up, and we'll see the score.
Okay. Thanks for bringing me up, CO3, and thanks to Bart and Cease for doing this, and the judges. I know that it's time out of your way, and I appreciate it. I kind of wish it was up earlier with my because we're kind of all asking the same thing, and Bart just went over this, so I kind of feel like it's like a repeat mode. But I think the whole debate stems from what is agency, right? And basically the terms that you guys are using it on. So my question is really for Bart, but I'd like to get Cease's response in here too, just to kind of, because he's not getting a lot of stuff. This is just being directed towards Bart. But when we look up agency, for example, like on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, right? It says that agency is a being with the capability to act. Agency denotes the exercise or manifestation of this capability. So my question partially is, so Bart has kind of come up with a different definition of it, and Cease is kind of more on the lines of what the definition is of the Stanford Encyclopedia. So my question is, Bart, why should the judges adhere towards your version over Cease's version of the definition? Because your definition doesn't give any type of attributes to it, and so I'm just a little. I guess I'm just a little off on it.
Sure, Robbie. Yeah, I'm happy to answer the question. The typical definition, the one that you provided from the SEP, that doesn't really provide much of a definition either, right? It says the capacity to act, I believe, is what you stated, or if I'm not stating it correctly, feel free to correct me. But that doesn't really define what that means, right? Like
it says a being with the capability to act.
Okay, well, that ascribes it to the typical conception, right, of parity with a mind. But the concept of agency itself is a broader concept that regards ability to act without that effect or action being causally determined. Because if we contextualize it again in the free will determinism debate, right, where if somebody grants determinism, then it would be very difficult to claim under a philosophical consideration that beings have agency. It would just be a bastardization of definition. So I think what my definition is doing is actually honing in on the exact distinction that we mean when we talk about agency. Why do we differentiate between a human being acting or an animal acting and the wind blowing, right? If we're just as causally determined by as the wind is, there's no distinction. It's just a psychological illusion. So my definition gets to the core of what this distinction is when we say agency. And if we don't get to this distinction, then we're just not using the terms effectively.
Your definition doesn't actually show how your view is separate from a naturalistic perspective.
It does, because this is an affirmative belief in a non-causal source of existence that has the capacity to act without causal determinacy.
Which is naturalism.
No. You're defining naturalism to include this, but no, naturalism does not affirm this belief. If you want to define naturalism, you're in that sense, you're redefining it, Cease.
Absolutely not.
Let me say this. I
could have been quiet for a little bit.
Do you know what naturalism is? Right. I'm sure you know. It's stating that only natural laws exist in the universe and are sufficient to explain its operation. You cannot even state definitively that a non-causal source of existence would be susceptible to naturalistic investigation. So
That's not the claim. That's
off
not.
the bat. No. Off the bat, it just doesn't. It's not that it's a claim. If you cannot establish this, you cannot claim that it's naturalistic.
That's not
That's
true
the
at all.
issue.
That's not true.
100%.
There's a
No.
difference between
I
things
think you're
being
confused at this
having a
point.
view, a metaphysical view of everything being physical or natural, and saying that necessarily science will be able to explain the detail of the thing. That's not the position.
No.
This is just again. But don't
You're
take my word
redefining
for it.
naturalism here.
Everybody listening to this, don't take my word for it. Examine Graham Oppy, who's the leading defender of naturalism as we speak, and see what he says about it, because he completely agrees with me in how I'm defining the terms.
No, I understand Graham Oppy, who's an atheist, right, would define naturalism maybe similar to you, but I'm not even sure that he actually affirms this position of agency. It just doesn't make.
I would just ask again to wait. Maybe Cease wants to go. The question is, why should the judges? I understand that you both have a different viewpoint of what it is you're trying to make the argument, but I would say to the judges, you're trying to make the argument, right? Why should the judges agree with your version of agency? And that would go to both of you, I guess, right? So that's what the question basically is.
Okay, I think I already answered. So,
right, I think Bart gave his.
And then also be brief so we can get to not the real Dwight, and then see the judges' scores.
Sure. Yeah, they should accept my definition of agency because it is the most commonly used and understood definition of agency. Agency implies mind, it implies intentional states, it implies decision making, it implies consciousness. There's nothing about a natural state that's uncaused leading to other causes that should have the word agency attributed to it. That is just muddying the waters for no reason. And even if we were to agree with Bart's definition, that would just be comparable to naturalism. There's no conflict there between the naturalistic position and what he's described. So to call out God is just irrational because you're just, again, muddying the waters for no reason. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think I already responded to that. So, yeah.
Let me get to Dwight, and then afterwards, after the judges' scores, we'll do more Q&A and cross-examination if you guys want to.
It's a good bet after.
But yeah, go ahead, Dwight.
All right. My first question is to Justin. Did my comment go through? Anyway, I said you get all the points for this round because you're looking fire.
No, you know what? That's why I like you. You lie a lot.
All right. So my question is for Cease, basically. So I heard an argument from Bart on why he believes the existence of God is rational. Cease, can you sum up just real briefly, since we're trying to end the thing? Can you sum up why, if you gave an argument for why the belief in the existence of God is not rational? I heard you rebut some of his ideas, but I don't know if I heard a case for why the belief is not rational.
It's irrational, again, depending on how you define the term. The general way of defining terms, where they are projecting a mind onto the ontology, is irrational because there's no framework to show that these beliefs aren't purely imaginary. That is the first thing.
What?
The second thing is when comparing worldviews and epistemic virtues, the theist and the deist are adding more assumptions. They're adding more ontologies. They're paying a price that the naturalist doesn't have to pay by not assuming disembodied minds and then desires that the deist would have to explain as to why God made the world one way as opposed to another way. Bart seems to want to bypass all of that and talk about agency without mind. That to me, at that point, there's no reason to call that God. At that point, it is perfectly comparable with an atheist who's a naturalist who takes Oppy's position. So he's not defended why belief in God is rational. He's ironically defended why belief in naturalism is rational, but he's just misused terms in that process.
Yeah. Do you mind if I respond briefly to that? Yeah. Again, Cease, you're redefining naturalism, then you're claiming that I'm redefining terms myself, which is really the height of
anybody
irony
listening
here.
to this can
No,
look up
you can definitely look it up. But again, I explain why your position about naturalism is just untenable, right? Because you're already assuming from the get-go that a non-causal source of existence. Okay.
Nobody bring anyone else on, just the judges. But continue. And then actually, just Don, you'll be the last question.
Yeah, just to get this out. So you're already assuming that a non-causal source of existence would be susceptible to naturalistic investigation, and if you're not assuming that, then you're just redefining naturalism to mean everything that exists, which again is presupposing or begging the question that we're discussing here. And then so you're not actually making an argument. You're just saying I'm redefining when you're expanding you're essentially expanding the definition of naturalism to remove any kind of position on a God belief, right? Which is not an argument; it's just a redefinition. And just one last thing to address what you said. That you said I'm adding more assumptions. The reason I provided the three syllogistic forms at the beginning is to present three arguments to substantiate my belief. There's no assumptions. I'm not making an assumption about my belief. My task here, right, was to substantiate what the proposition, and that's what I did with these arguments. So with you saying that I'm assuming ontological baggage, that's not an argument. That's just you saying that you don't like my position, but that's not like you refuting it.
No, I'm pointing to the fact that okay, sorry. Can I? Well,
yeah, I'll give you 3 sentences, and then I'll end it there, and then do just on, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm not really defining anything. And again, I urge anybody listening to this conversation to look up the different versions of naturalism and what that conceptually entails. I've not really defined the terms Bart has. He's not actually provided any of the entailments as to why his position is what it is. And all he's done is really redefine things in a very confusing and way that just doesn't lead to what he wants it to.
And then just on, ask your question.
Yeah, sure. So I joined a little late towards the end of the debate, so I'm kind of confused. I've heard Bart say just like one thing a couple times now that's confusing me. What do you mean by like a non-causal origin of the universe?
So we generally understand reality within causal temporal terms, and non-causal means it's a source that is not caused from where the causal states that we experience originate.
Okay. That's a little weird. Typically, I just say like non-caused. When you say non-causal, you're just saying like there's this entity, or yeah, entity if you want to call it, that has no effect on like material reality or something like that.
Oh, I understand. Yeah. So in this case, non-causal and uncaused would be synonymous. So if there's any confusion, they are synonymous, and that's how I'm using them.
Sure. That was pretty much it.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. Cool. Now we get to see the scores from the judges. So I'm kind of excited, but let's see how this goes. We're gonna bring back Doragon, and okay. So basically, we're gonna start off with Sir. Sir, give your score, who you think won the debate, and then give us your reasons, and then all the other judges follow suit.
Yeah. So I think when I looked at this debate, I tried to follow the rubrics as close as possible, and I think that when it came to like preparation and giving arguments and having everything ready, I think the edge goes to Bart a little bit. But when it comes to like cross-examination and like pinning down the case and like making the actual argument, I think I give it to Cease. So I do think it was probably closer than it seems that the comments would maybe have interpreted. But I do give the slight edge to Cease, and I would say Cease won. The final score I had when I had everything tallied was I have Bart at 39 total points, and I have Cease at 40.5.
Okay. So 39 out of 50 and 40.5 out of 50. Okay, so Sir, you have Cease winning, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then just Jim, you can give your score and thoughts and who you think won.
Yeah, so I was trying to remain as unbiased as possible and kind of look at the categories, even though the categories were a bit ambiguous in terms of what we're trying to look for, right? So I kind of like looked at it in terms of how each interlocutor was addressing the main topic of the debate and whether they were able to lay out their arguments and follow the structure of the debate the way it was laid out. In scoring them, it was really tight, but I give the edge to Bart. I have him at 43.5 and Cease at 42.5.
Okay, cool. Very close. Very cool. And then Saul, you can go next and tell us your thoughts and how you scored it.
I'm still tallying the last piece. So
Okay.
if someone else could go, I'm still finishing up.
I'm ready. I can go.
This thing, go ahead.
Yeah, so it was a lot of information to take in. My final score was 45 Cease, 40 Bart, and that really came down to Cease's responses to some of the argumentation that Bart put up. I think the way that it was framed, Bart had it to do to give the justifications for some of the positions that would need to be accepted for his conclusion or for the rationality of the position to be kind of shored up. And I just don't think it got there. So my final score is 45 to 40 Cease.
Cease one.
Yep.
Okay. And Doragon, you can give your score. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, it's as good as anyone's gonna get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. So on the organization, I think Bart did slightly a little bit better. Like I did break them down into decimals, but I think organization was a little bit better on that. Also, just with a little bit slight of edge on the arguments. As far as the strength and supporting, I think that Cease did slightly better. Also on the cross examination, I think he did better. The strategy and the critical issues that we kind of ran into, I think Bart did a little bit better on that. I think the presentation was also a little bit better on him, but the numbers are actually pretty close to each other. I ended up with the scores are kind of low from what I'm looking at, and I think it might just be my own personal experience of like how this went. I think just real quickly, I apologize. There was a lot of issues with like us trying to run into like clarification of terms. I think maybe if we had like 5 to 10 minutes of like people just maybe like the debaters asking like to clarify terms and maybe using like a standardized dictionary or something for these terms, maybe could have helped a little bit. I think we just kind of lost a little bit of time in all of the arguments when it came down to something like that. So I ended up with 20.9 for Cease and 23.2 for Bart.
So are you saying that who won?
Bart by what was it, 22 like almost 3 points.
Okay. And then right now it's standing at 2 for 2. So Saul is gonna break the tie. Whoever he says won is gonna win the debate.
Yeah, so for me, I think it comes out to Cease for the following. So in the categories, when I was looking, first of all, for the category of argument, the use of argument, that was scored out for the maximum. I felt that Cease was a little bit ahead in that regard because of the focus of the topic being the belief if it's rational. And I think that the questions that he was posing basically was undermining rationality at its core, a little bit more so than Bart had been focused on doing so. In the category of the organization and clarity, I think Bart came out there in terms of the presentation, the syllogism, etc. When it came to the supporting material, I felt that there was a small amount of supporting material outside of opinion or perspective, and so they were about even on that. When it came to the cross-examination and rebuttal, they were pretty close, but I think that Cease did a little bit more of a pointed job in really identifying what he saw as inconsistencies in the rebuttal. And finally, when it came to the strategy in identifying the critical issues, I think it was Cease who was identifying more of the critical issue when it came to the definition, and in particular definition of what it meant for there to be mind or intentionality, etc. So for me, that's what it came out to. The score was lower. It came out to 30 for Cease and 27 for Bart, because I think that the topic overall, like when it was diverted into more of terms as opposed to the rationality being the focus.
And basically, to summarize, I want to thank Bart and Cease for being here. I think both you guys did a very good job. Very highly intellectual individuals. You are beyond my intellectual level. But the final result is we have 3 judges siding with Cease and 2 judges siding with Bart. So the winner of this debate would be Cease to Know. Everyone on the panel, if we could clap for the winner of the debate, Cease to Know. And but it was a very good debate, and I think Bart, you did very well. You were a very great opposition to Cease to Know. I think both of you did tremendous. And this was really awesome. This is like literally an awesome debate. Like we got to do this in like a professional sense. But debaters, any final thoughts on like the judges' determinations?
Well, I really appreciate Co for hosting this again, and the judges so much for your time and effort in judging this. Congratulations, of course, to Cease. I think you put up a strong offense. Of course, I still believe that that I countered it effectively and substantiated the proposition. But nevertheless, congratulations. And I had a lot of fun really preparing for this, and it really tested my debating prep and just formulating and condensing the arguments so that I could communicate them effectively. So overall, I came out 3-2 in favor of Cease. It was still a fantastic event, and I don't regret 1 minute of it.
I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, judges and the audience and everybody. Thank you to Bart for agreeing to do this. I was waiting a long time to finally get a chance to engage on this level, and I had a good time. So thank you, everybody, and I appreciate all the gifts and all the love. So thank you.
Okay, and honestly, this has been like a really cool event. This is a professional debate with a lot of preparation. It was very successful. Let me say some parting words, and then honestly, we could have like open Q&A for like the rest of the night. Anyone from the crowd who wants to come up and ask any questions or anything, people can drop, people can join. But here, give me 1 sec.
Actually, I do have to head. It's pretty late up here.
Okay.
So, sorry, guys. It's been a long day.
Yeah, no worries.
We'll see you later. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you for.
Cease. Congrats.
I just wanted to, just maybe we could get a round of applause for Co for actually putting this together. I know it was a lot of work.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's do that.
It was a lot of work. It was draining.
Yeah,
Thank you for
I hope
putting it
everybody has a
together.
good night, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you, all the judges and audience and the host and Bart. Thank you, everybody.
yeah, right on, Cease. Congrats again. Bye.
Thank you, Cease.
Good night. But also a round of applause for like Bart. Bart, you did very well.
Yes.
And like yeah, like your arguments were really good.
Well, I appreciate that.
But what else was I gonna say? Oh, I'm just there's nothing much more I had to say. I just wanted to say like thank you everyone who watches my videos and like comes to these like lives. I really appreciate it. Thank you judges for humoring me and like being my judges and like, you know, helping out. I really appreciate it. You guys took time out of your day. Like I'm grateful that you guys, you know, like you're giving me a chance and like helping me out with this. Thank you for Bart and Cease for debating. And honestly, this went really well. If anyone in the comments, anyone else wants to debate and do a formal debate and you want me to host it, I'd be honored. And I can like do promotions and like get a lot of people in here to watch the debate. If anyone else wants to debate somebody or challenge somebody, DM me and we could set it up and give a week in advance of preparation for both sides. Bart, if you want to do a rematch with Cease, you literally can do that anytime. We'll do it again, and I'm totally down. But yeah,
Yeah, sure. We can talk about that. You know, again, it's been a long time coming debating Cease, and you know, I respect the guy. Naturally, I disagree with them on this point, but I think this is as you said in one of your videos, this is a great opportunity to exchange on these ideas and really understand what people mean and what the strength of the arguments are.
yeah. And I think one of my next debate is either going to be one of the two, Admir versus Becca, regarding something about food, and then either that or Jay versus Ross Soul. This has been a long requested debate. It depends if Ross Soul is down to do it. And but yeah, Jay versus Ross Soul with some preparation. And then that or either Admir versus Becca regarding something about food. I have to look into it. But those will either one of those two will be my next debates that I'm hosting.
Well, it's good to see that you're doing this, Co. Like, this is really neat. It's nice to see something kind of official, not just a bunch of people hollering at each other.
Yeah. Hopefully, like it's entertaining. I hope it's not like boring. Me, like I enjoy debate and like you know this is fun for me. But
Well, you've had the crowd in here for quite a while, and so I don't think it's been boring by any means.
okay. But yeah, so I mean, the floor is open for like any kind of questions, and like we can just talk about really anything. I could put a different topic on the screen.
Well, I had a question on the topic at hand. The question is, why do people, before getting in these debates, like Bart, why would you get in a debate like this without being, how do I put it, without being versed on the current standing of scientific discovery?
Well, social, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to because
Well,
if you want to clarify, I'd be happy to
yeah,
respond.
so in 2020, in March of 2020, a group of scientists discovered how life formed on Earth. They were able to successfully map out the exact way that the proteins form. They have an entire published paper on it called "Small Protein Folds at the Root of Ancient Metabolic Network." Really fascinating stuff that shows and provides all of the evidence and proof that life formed through the aspect of electrons attracting each other and repelling each other in water, which allowed proteins to attach to each other and therefore forming the protein structures. And it's been done in labs as well, to where you can see the proteins form and replicate, proving that life came from the natural world through these structures. which we can now also see within our human structure and our human genome.
I don't think so.
Okay, and I'm
That
not
doesn't prove anything.
sure
I apologize.
what part of that I was missing or I contradicted. Were you here for the debate?
Well, yeah, I was here for it, and part of the contradiction was primarily addressing the fact that life comes from a creator or some type of um, other like deity in an aspect, when we have the
Okay.
evidence now to show that life actually does come from a naturalistic.
But I don't think he made a
Yeah,
point of
let me.
life when he
Yeah,
said
Okay,
that.
I
yeah.
don't think you.
Let me
Sorry.
clarify
Well,
this. Yeah, because I think you're a bit confused about what the issue was. So I wasn't claiming that some kind of creator or a non-causal source came down and commenced life, or some kind of creationist version, or even a non-creationist commencement of life from a supernatural entity. The point was about, if you're referencing a non-causal source of existence, it's about existence, which is existence as a whole, not life. Life is a contingent within that existence.
okay, then yes, I must have gotten in a little bit too late then. Because I was taking existence as in human existence, not as in existence of just like a rock.
Correct. Yeah, I wasn't making a sort of biological origination argument.
Yeah,
So
you were.
nothing. Yeah,
Yeah,
nothing that you said would be incompatible with open deism. It
no,
would be
you're correct.
quite compatible. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to say that I was pretty impressed with how that debate went, and I told Bart I didn't really agree with what Placide said necessarily because there were a lot of categories there. When we're talking about the organization, I think all the judges, maybe Jim didn't, I can't remember, said that Bart won out on that. But through winning out on that, I mean, there were so many places in which Cease would have to, the lack of preparation when Bart was proposing things or had his propositions, had his definitions. Cease didn't reject the definitions or propositions outright, right? He had a lot of opinions and perspectives. And so when I heard that, oh, it was more, it was more opinionated in the way of what Bart was doing from Saul. That was just ridiculous. So I honestly didn't. I don't think I think the judgment of this could have been maybe the best it could have with the resources we have, but I mean, I'll just say that.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
be honest, I think that Bart technically, in my opinion, just through the last I don't know half hour or hour that I've been sitting here listening, I got in around like 11 something. That the argument was more in Bart's favor as far as providing the definitions for what he was trying to get at, and I did feel like Cease had jumped around to try to kind of ignore his definitions and just say that he wasn't providing it. Maybe
Exactly.
Cease didn't necessarily hear the definitions that were being provided.
Right.
But I felt like Cease was trying to provide his own definitions to what Bart was saying, and then saying that those definitions didn't make sense or
Right.
were not provided properly.
Right. And he mentioned Oppie consistently. He's like, oh, just look at what Oppie has to say. Well, you never once expanded on what Oppie has to say. You just said, look at Oppie's view. Like, it was just kind of ridiculous. I think this was unfairly judged, but that's just my opinion. And I
I
think
don't
he
think it was
won
unfairly
for
judged.
sure, Bart.
Yeah, I
I feel
would.
like the judges did their best, but as far as the outcome was the outcome, I feel like the section that I heard, of course, I probably didn't, like I said, I came in late, so I didn't hear all of it. So I'm pretty sure that there was more to it than that. But I think the judges did a good job. I think that it came down to the wire. Most of them were like right on. Like I think one judge was just 1 point away from giving it to Bart, and another judge, like on both sides, were about 3 to 4 points away from each other. So, and then the last one came down to just a couple points as well. So I feel like overall, I think that it had a good outcome. I probably would have been on DS Shark's side here. No offense, Bart. Can't
No, it's
exclude your original name.
There's no problem there, social. And I know, like you said, I respect the decision of the judges. Even if I don't necessarily agree with them, I felt that I put forward the arguments and I presented them coherently and rationally, and I explained all the definitions and how they connect to the conclusions. The only thing I was getting from Cease in his responses was A, that's not the definition, B, you're confused, and C, go read Graham Oppy, or Graham Oppy agrees with this. And these weren't arguments against my position, right? It was essentially just saying, okay, well, I'm going to agree to all that, and I'm just going to define naturalism, or agree, or say that naturalism includes all that. So it was essentially like this deflection from actually going into the nuts and bolts of my arguments. And I never heard any response from him about, like, for example, why cardinality and countability diffuse or resolve the contradiction with infinite regress, right? He just said cardinality and countability, and then he never actually explained what even he means by that, or how it would resolve an infinite regression contradiction. And then when I pressed him to that, he said, no, I did explain it. So I feel substantively,
Yeah, no, I heard that.
yeah, I feel substantively I did better than him. But I have an argumentative style. Maybe you guys can comment on that, where maybe I sound more passionate than I should, and it might reflect poorly on somebody's
Well,
general take
this is
on
what
the
I think.
position.
I think in the beginning you did really well. I think with your opening statement, because it showed that you were prepared with it, and you gave your points and you kind of went through them. Cease didn't. Cease did not, and people were noticing that too. Cease did not really have a opening statement. He was just pretty much
It went
taking what
directly
you
into the
right,
rebuttal.
right,
Yeah, that was kind of one thing that I kind of felt like was like, wait, it probably shouldn't have gone that way.
right. And so
But
I could
another
tell.
thing that I kind of noticed, if I could say, just like, because when I
Good.
was trying to really put all this stuff together, and like I'm sitting here like, I got like 4 pages of numbers that I'm trying to put together. But a big issue that I kind of ran into was I felt like, Bart, you were placing ideas out like to try and build like an argument. Some stuff maybe we haven't really heard before, which I think is extremely interesting and important. But I think that Cease kind of came at it from the perspective of, this is my understanding of what naturalism is, and this is what my understanding of I can't even.
A deity is.
Yeah,
Deism.
and I think like he kind of drew these really hard lines in between the two, where there is no flex and there is no give. It kind of creates like a little bit of an issue to have like a conversation or any kind of interaction there. I kind of felt like that was a little bit. I was hoping a little bit more of not that.
I kind of wish Cease was still here. There
Definition
was.
to me,
Yeah.
and that was pretty much the whole thing, because you guys honestly didn't like really get into much details other than a definition, and so that's why I kind of wanted to go first to ask my question, because the other ones that followed maybe might have changed things for them, but to kind of say, okay, look, this is what your definition is, right? Why should, right? You've already broken it down, right, of what you think, but why should the judges adhere to your version of the definition of agency versus like CC's used more of like a textbook version of agency, right? Okay, so why should we adopt what you're saying, Bart? Why is it better to explain the information? And so
Yeah.
I think we kept going on and on to that. And I think for future references, Bart, I think it would be better for you sometimes just like streamline it. You know, my definition is better because of one, it's going to show this. Two, I provide, right? And I think if you kind of laid out things like that more, I think it would have made it easier, a little bit easier to follow.
And
Yeah,
Bart,
I
something.
think you have a point. Yeah, go ahead, social.
Yes, something that I noticed on both you and Cease were doing is I think that it would help you both if during a rebuttal, the rebuttal didn't consist of, well, he didn't do it, or he didn't say that, or he didn't. It would help if your rebuttal explained what your meanings were and finished your arguments. Because what it seemed like Cease was doing a lot, and you kind of did a couple times on towards the end there, was just saying that no, he didn't describe it, or yes, I did describe it, but not telling what you described or how you described it. Like
Right.
not telling how you defined it and providing that definition again so that everybody can understand that you did define it and re-upping the fact that you did define it. Instead of doing that, it seemed like it was more of a, well, I did do it and you didn't do this and you didn't do this and you didn't do that, rather than it being a rebuttal as far as just reaffirming
Your
what
point.
you did say and how you said it and the fact that you did, you know, you did define it, you know. And I felt like Cease was whenever he did his rebuttals, it was always just to say, well, no, he didn't define it. He's just saying he defined it. He didn't actually define it. And that's kind of what the rebuttals just kind of felt like. They were just like kind of back. They weren't actually answering any kind of questions or solving any dilemmas.
Yeah, and I was writing down everything that he was saying. I had just my little legal pad that I use normally, and I was trying to respond to all the stuff that he was saying, but he wasn't. I didn't see any actual arguments that he was making. He kept returning again to, well, naturalism includes this, naturalism includes this, and at one point I think I addressed that directly and said, first of all, you have no basis to believe that naturalistic pursuits would encompass a non-causal state, since we are essentially operating within a causal temporal space-time. So off the bat there, that idea just seems outlandish, because you haven't actually substantiated that first. Second, I'm advocating for the affirmative belief in a non-causal source of existence with agency, and I already told them that if you wanted to replace it with mind, then there wouldn't really be much of an issue if you're more comfortable with using the term mind. So that again would contradict the naturalistic position, which does not necessarily affirm this belief. And there was another point I was going to make regarding naturalism just not being encompassing, but it escapes me now. But the point being that he was merely just claiming this. Oh yeah, it was the fact that he never provided an argument for why infinite regress wouldn't be an alternative, right? I did, and that was my symmetry breaker, which is what puts me in an open deist position. He just presents this initial state, right, and says, "Oh, naturalism counts all uncaused sources of existence, and the only way it's God is if you definitely explain that it's a mind, right?" And the agency portion of my argument essentially took care of that, even if I didn't call it a mind. And second, again, he's essentially just expanding the definition of naturalism to stamp out any belief that isn't just plain old theism.
Well, yeah, he was trying to put out the point for his side. He was trying to show his definition of God as being the only definition of God, based on the arguments that we normally have on these lives. And he was trying to use that as a way to say, well, this is the only type of God there can be. So what you're saying, I wouldn't consider to be God, basically, or a godlike thing. It would just be a naturalist thing. I think that's what he was trying to get at. But his argument for it was very poor.
It was so weak. He had no
It was
argument.
very weak in that aspect, and he was trying not to concede to the fact that a definition of God isn't really defined, and he was trying to say that the definition of God is defined as something with a mind, but it's not. Like the actual definition of God, anything can be God technically, mind, or it can be mindless for all purposes.
But
So
You should have probably
attributes.
agreed to the definition of what God would be before you debated. Was
Right.
this the debate?
Let
Is
me,
there a
Except for the
God?
term.
Or the
let me
Thomist
also
argument for
bring something
God?
really quickly before I forget again, because I think it's an important point. Whenever the dictionary definition of something, I don't remember exactly what it was, but whenever it got brought up and you said, well, I can understand, like, if you use that in just a general context, that makes sense. But when we're trying to have this conversation right now about this, we would have to be able to apply this accordingly right now. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Are you asking me, Dargon?
Yeah.
About when we
When I brought up the
discuss
definition, are you talking about that?
which words in particular? Do you remember which
I'm
words
trying
we
to
were
remember.
discussing?
But
Agency?
they said, like, it's very specific, it's this, but you said, Yeah, I understand it says that, but the thing is, right now at this point when we're trying to have this conversation, I would have to, because it
Agency,
only applies to
agency.
the physicality of it.
That was my question.
Yeah, Robbie brought up
Yeah.
the agency. Yeah, so my response to that was Robbie brought up the agency definition from a standard encyclopedia of
Right, right,
philosophy.
right. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
But
and
I think that was a very important point that you brought up
Right,
that
because I
way.
think that's what was going to hinge the debate, the winning of the
Right,
debate, to tell you the
exactly.
truth, was that's why I brought it up, because it's sure that's how you understand it, Bart, and sure that's how Cease understands it. But if you're trying to convince like the judges, right, and you're kind of going against what is already set, then you have to try to convince them. I think you're on the defense on that, because then you have to convince them, well, you need to adhere to that. You need to add on to that definition. And my definition fits better for that because and so and so and so and so.
Yeah, and Cease actually, this is the thing, right? Like, you're right. I probably should have honed in on that as well. But the thing is that Cease agreed to my definition of agency. He was just stating that this is encompassed by naturalism, right? And getting back to what Prook and Social Fixit are saying, I mean, he's not the arbiter here of like what the definition of God is and what the definition of naturalism is. These are the things that we're debating, which is ultimately why I found his counters unpersuasive, because essentially he just kept coming back to, I don't have an argument against you. I'm just going to say that your position is naturalistic. But again, that's just unconvincing for the reasons that I put forward. And as far as the definition of agency, when we try to examine what this capacity is and what even a being is, right, it comes down to if for example a rock, right, had the ability to act without causal determination, there would be nothing preventing us from claiming it has agency if it's able to act without causal determination. Uh, Similarly to ourselves, right? If we're not able to establish causal free will that exists absent or separate from causal determination, then determinism, whether soft or hard determinism, wins out. So I was trying to essentially get to the nuts and bolts of the mechanism that allows for agency, and that's really the definition that I provided, right? Which is an ability to produce an effect without such effect being causally determined by external factors.
But see, I think you got to clean it up. I think it's just kind of. I think when you're explaining it, okay, right, but like I think to me, you just need to kind of keep it simple and keep it kind of concise.
Yeah,
And
I
you need
think
to show why the other person's position doesn't fit of what we're talking about, right? You could say that it's leaving out information that you need to have. My definition is adding in this information that you need to have, and this is the reasoning why. One, blah 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 blah. Two, I think if you did things like that, then I think because you were definitely more prepared for the debate. I think and we've talked about this a few times. I think honestly that would have swayed probably the people that were a little bit holdouts, because I think it's about you proving your point to them. And I think because like I said, I think you're already kind of at the defense with it, because they're probably, right, the judges, because I don't know what was discussed beforehand and everything else. You're saying you and Cease agreed on the terms, but that doesn't mean that the judges know that's everything that's being agreed, or having the same outlook on terms and stuff like that. So you have to convince them of why they should use your term. And I think if you could have convinced them that your term makes more sense, because that was the whole debate really, then I think you would have won.
Yeah, I agree. I think you would have won if you had done a little bit more on that side. I think one of the holdups was within the aspect of agency, and I don't remember who it was that made the comment, but the comment was about it just being a Geiger counter. Would it have, according to your definition, a Geiger counter would have agency, and so the idea behind that was, well, that doesn't seem very godly or anything, or creationist type thing. And
Yeah,
so,
J Mike brought that up, but I don't see how one can establish a Geiger counter as not being susceptible to causal determination, right? I think that's.
Geiger counters are what we measure radiation with, right?
yes,
I don't
they're
know. I
so
don't.
like they interact and they just tell you numbers.
Right. So
Yeah, I
I
wouldn't I
kind
wouldn't
of
call
missed
that
what he was saying
non-causally
about that.
determined. It just like I don't know what J Mike was really. Maybe he's got some
I think
knowledge
he
Well,
about
means
he,
Geiger
the
he was
counters.
fissioning where if like you know the half-lives of things, so you know the average amount of stuff that'll fission, but you can't tell which individual atom will fission. It's completely random which nuclei will fission, right? Because
Hashtag not
it's
random.
Niels, actually, I don't think I don't think physics on radiation says that actually regarding absolute randomness.
No, isn't it like a
Yeah, it's
quantum process where it's just like in the like you can model it stochastically, like, and you can explain why it happens. It's just why this, like, if you have a bunch of unstable nuclei, why unstable nuclei A breaks down instead of unstable nuclei B is so far undetermined and seemingly random.
Yeah, and
yes, but
that
being seemingly random now doesn't mean that it's truly random, right?
correct.
Just because we haven't been able to determine why it happens, doesn't mean that there's not a reason for it. It could be that the other nuclei, I can't even speak right now. That the nucleus of some of the other ones around it are causing some kind of vibration effect or something to it that
Oh no,
causes it to
I
break
think
down
we know
fast.
it's
It
quantum
could,
at least. So if it's going to be deterministic, it's going to have to be because quantum mechanics is deterministic in some way, and we're just missing something.
Yeah,
yeah,
the
it could just be
qualitative.
But
something
that
we
could
haven't
be
been
the
able to.
possibility.
Right.
Yes, I don't
Okay.
think that you can ever say that it's truly random yet. I think that there's just not enough data to say it's truly random.
Yeah, so
Oh no, I
that's where
agree
the
because there's technically that other possibility, right? Like that it could all be like
Well, thank
um,
you.
deterministic or.
All
So
right,
that's why I
guys.
don't think it is like 100% random, but I think so far we're guessing it's random, or it appears random, or at least by the Copenhagen interpretation, it's random.
So it's been a
Dargon, go
very
ahead.
long day for me. I'm gonna get going. Social, it's really nice to see you, man. It's been a long time since we've actually
Yeah, it has been.
crossed paths. But I
Dragon. Thank
appreciate
you
you
again
guys
for judging.
having me up here as a judge, and I appreciate all of you. I really do. I hope everybody be good, be safe, take care, and I'll catch you guys later. I gotta go get some rest.
Yeah,
Thank you,
catch you
Argon.
later.
Oh,
Great
Appreciate
seeing you
you.
again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
by the way, I'm gonna upload this whole live onto YouTube. I'm gonna try to, but it's probably gonna be like 3 hours long because we're still on the same debate live. But I'm still gonna I'm still gonna upload it.
Yeah, go
If
for
you're gonna
that.
edit it,
And Coco, I
Um,
think you did a great job. I think something that would help is if you used your screen to help keep some notes for some of the people. Like if you come up with a definition for something and there's an agreed definition, you can just say like you can write out the agreed definition on the screen would be nice to help keep everybody in line. Um,
okay.
that way they're not kind of stepping over each other again, trying to say, well, no, they didn't define it. You can have proof. Yeah, it's been defined. It's on the screen.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if maybe for the next thing, like certain terms that might come up that could be questionable, that hey, look, when they use this term, this is the definition that they agreed of what it is. And then another thing that I think would have helped is probably definitely at the end is like we kind of went to like the judges come down, think their thoughts, and give their score. But you could probably tell that some judges probably still had some questions because they didn't the breaks and stuff like that. I think it would have been good where the judges could have just asked clarifying questions or just things like that again, because I might persuade somebody. Let's say somebody had a stance where they were a little confused with what Bart was saying. If he gives a really good explanation to clear it up, that might be a deciding factor there. Especially with the scoring system was very close as it is, right? That could have made a difference of Bart winning versus Bart not, getting it. So I think
Yeah.
with them asking questions to where they're okay, and then do judging after that, because then they have all the information, right? If I'm judging, but then I'm like, well, I didn't know what this was, and I didn't know what he meant by that, and this was a little confusing. Right? I'm judging off of
Also,
that. You want them to have like clear information of what they got in.
yeah, what might help for next time is you might want to like you could have them like at any time be able to be like, okay, I'm going to declare a definition, and then when they formally declare a definition, you just write it down. But they have to formally declare it, and they have to say, I formally declare a definition, or something like that. So then you have like, you don't have to focus too much and be like, oh, did he define that? Or did he mean that colloquially? It's like, nope, they clearly wanted to define that word. They said, I want to formally define Wumpalumpagus as my favorite word.
Right.
That is
yeah,
an
But by
actual
the
word.
I was just gonna say real quick that CEASE accepted the definition as far as I was concerned and all of that, right? I think a lot of it was the fact that when Cease was to respond to Bart's definitions and his concept on agency and whatever else, there was less of probing into that, but more so saying, okay, this just fits with naturalism. And so when Cease said that, he didn't really substantiate it past saying that Oppie holds this view that you hold, Bart. And so, so that doesn't make sense. Well, he didn't substantiate how Oppie holds this view. He just said it, right? So I think, I don't know, it was kind of weird, but I
Yeah,
definitely.
he just mentioned Oppie a few times and didn't actually. I mean, first of all, one could infer that that's some kind of argument from authority, although I don't think he meant it that way. Cease is much too smart to do that kind of silly fallacy. But he didn't actually. This is what like kind of annoys me. Even though again I respect the decision of the judges, he didn't address my argument. He just kept repeating naturalism, naturalism, and I explained why on several accounts again why. This does not necessarily, this actually does not go into naturalism because you're assuming that naturalism applies to a non-causal state when we're exploring reality through causal and temporal ordering. So just asserting this without actually addressing my argument, I feel is a concession almost. So I would have. I don't have that kind of cutthroat. I'm developing a cutthroat, like a more cutthroat debating style, but I'm not like Amdir or J Mike, who will literally just like, destroy somebody who's not addressing the argument. And I feel that if I had pinned them down, for example, on the infinite regress, where I explained the contradiction and he just said cardinality and countability, and I said, you're not providing an argument for why there's no contradiction. You're just saying cardinality and countability. That's not an argument. And if I kept like pressing him on that, I think it would have bottomed out. And
Right, but I
he
think
would
you
not
could have
have.
done that like a few
It
times.
sounds
Like
like
in the
there's
sense
different
of, I think
levels
you
here.
could have done it like, okay, look, just
Yeah.
for record keeping,
Like you
this is
can
the third
legally
time
have
I've
two
asked
rules.
you. This is the third time that I've asked you, and again, he has not provided a stance on this, right? So I'm going to move on to my point that will answer this clearly for you guys, right? And I
Correct.
think
Yeah,
if
if
you
you
did
keep
things
it
like that,
counting.
right? I think if you did like just leave it like to three, like because you're addressing that you've already asked it and it's happening again, and that he's just not answering it, and so then I would just move on to my thing. So it's just a quick, fast little thing, and then just moving on to your point.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
Cio, there was one other thing that I noticed quite a bit.
Yeah.
I understand this is your first time, so take this as like helpful criticism. Um, maintaining times is very important when you're doing a debate like this. Allowing one person to talk for longer than their allotted time, and just saying, "Well, I'm going to let them do another like sentence or two." Um, just it shows favoritism. It comes across as favoritism, and the whole point of your position is to not show favoritism and just to be concise and precise. So like
I
if
hear,
you have to cut somebody off and say your time is up, and
I
then
hear
their
that
time is
y'all
up.
like creating Yeah, I something completely agree with like that, Social. I had a problem with that, and I kept on telling
Like
Mr. Ko
you
about
make
that.
the rules are getting structured, and there should be like different rooms because. And then if y'all don't mind me saying, I sorry I interrupted you because y'all were. I got on it because I was hearing y'all speak a lot of words that I want like. I mean, I know, but I was interested in what y'all were saying, and then from that it went to this that. But what I was seeing that y'all have structure, like you could have two different debating rooms or whatever, and like everyone has their own little. Yeah, this was this and this was this. What I'm saying is that y'all are on something here. I just want to say that. I'll let y'all get back to it.
Yeah,
Oh no,
no,
you're
it's
good.
definitely a good thing
Yeah.
that he's got going here, Coco.
Okay. But yeah, so like I'm basically gonna run like the typical unorganized TikTok debates and then the formal TikTok debates. But oh yeah, I get what you're saying. I was trying not to show favoritism, and I was kind of trying to see if I could allow both sides to finish up their sentences. But yeah, I should probably like cut them off and be like, "Hey, the time is gone. It's time to move on," and not let
Yeah,
them
because
finish.
the whole point is if they're not able to get their if they know they have a time, it's on them to track their times as well. And if they are unable to finish in a timely manner or get their point across and just ramble, then that is on them and it shows their lack of debating skills. And it would have caused the judges to see them in a different light. You know what I mean? The judging would have happened differently if the judge was like, well, that Cease really, he just kind of went on a ramble and didn't really finish his sentence. And then he ran out of time before he could get there. You know, that would have been a point against him rather than for him. But by allowing him to continue his ramble and try to figure out his thoughts later on, allowed for that aspect of, oh, well, he did finally get his point across.
And it's actually informative to continue this dialect and still have the idea that we can come back because you know what I mean, because
Yeah, because he can always come back and finish his.
Yeah, I thought the judges, the panel of judges, real quick, was. I mean, I know we talked, you talked about it and beforehand and whatever else, but as I noticed that panel of judges, I mean, I don't
Who
know,
did you
man,
want it to be?
pretty
You?
biased. It was a
Who did
pretty,
you
it
want
was
it to
it was a
be?
pretty biased panel. But yeah, go on with whatever y'all.
Wait, I
Who
tried
did you
so
want it to be?
hard to.
You, Q Top. Who else? Who else is there?
Oh no,
Big John
No, but you
Steele.
got
I felt like
Who
how
else?
many judges?
I
Bible
think it was a fair. I
guy.
think it was a fair
4 out
panel
of 5
overall.
judges
Honestly,
were staunch atheists or agnostics, and one of the judges was like maybe a little bit of a deist or something. So yeah, obviously this is a biased panel. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but can
like
they judge fairly though? Yeah, but you're looking at the context of the people though, right? Can the context of the people judge fairly? I don't see many people saying just Jim, isn't going to be a person that's going to judge
that's
not
true. Yeah.
judge fairly. I don't think average Justin. People are going to say, you know what?
No, I
When
would
I
say
put him in
that.
the
I would
thing,
say that, right?
is he
Because
not
average.
going to judge fairly? Well,
No,
that's what I'm saying. You're saying it's
no.
bias.
I
I
don't
would
mean to
say
That
interrupt,
they're
guys, but I appreciate y'all letting me stop by. But it sounds like y'all guys should be the judges. It seems like y'all are very informative and everything. I don't know. I just tagged along this one time, but I just want to say I appreciate y'all, and y'all have a happy holidays and Christmas. Santa Claus is real. Make your list. Bring Santa back where we can live for. Take it to the Middle East if you can. Send some presents over there. All right, fellas.
thank you.
Yeah,
all
so
right,
so I've,
bienvenidos.
I've
Have a good
never
night.
seen
Have a good one. Thank you.
Justin. I've never seen Justin in a stream that has ever been sympathetic to any type of deist or theist view. Right? He goes literally on live to argue for atheism or against
Right.
theism
So
or
does yeah, but
deism.
my point is, so does all of them, right? So does Juju. So does Sir does different things.
Right, but he
So
wasn't a
my
judge.
thing is, though, can you look at the person and say, hey, look, you know what? This person has you have to find somebody that's going to be able to understand the philosophy and the terms that they're talking about in general, right? There's a lot of
I
people
don't
on
think they
TikTok.
did
They're
though.
not
Right?
good at that stuff, right? To begin with. So you have to find people that are going to do that stuff, and then you have to find a person that most people would say, you know what? I know that they're an atheist. I know that they're a theist or whatever, a hardcore Christian, like John, right? Could John stepped out because he couldn't do it or whatever, right? But you could say, you know what, me, I would say, okay, well, John would be a perfect person because he can understand the content fine, right? And I think he could be very impartial if you asked him to say, hey, look, you know what, don't put your view on it. Just listen to the information. And then what did you think just from that? I think we had a pretty good panel of judges overall.
Yeah, you're
and
never going to get
also,
away from having people with biases. There's going to be biases. It's whether they can set their biases aside during the debate on the aspect of being a judge, not on the aspect of I'm trying to win an argument. And I think that
Right.
the judges did very well on that. I think that their numbers showed that they did well on that because like several of them were just within like a point or half a point, and so like that really shows that they were trying really hard to judge equally. And even some of them had really low points, showing that they were really trying hard,
Right.
even not to give favor. So I think that was good on them. But I don't think you're ever going to get anybody without a type of biasy within any kind of debate.
Yeah, but it's amount of bias, right? So if we're talking about like average Justin or
You can't judge amount of biases. A biasy is a
but you can't
biasy.
judge what you
Right.
just said, right? You can't judge them saying that okay, they're going to be unbiased in this context in this situation, and we're going to
yeah, but really quick,
it's the same argument, right? But
yeah, but really quick, let me jump in. I actually was picking up the judges like with the sole intention of like having it not be biased. I had like 2 atheists, 1 agnostic. There were supposed to be 2 Christians, but I ended up doing Christian and a deist. Wit was gonna be a judge, and Bought by Blood was gonna be a judge.
see, that's what I'm
But
talking about. Those are 2 bad judges, right? And
How is John a bad judge?
dude, he's a pastor.
What?
Yeah,
They're all gonna be something. Somebody's gonna be something. The thing is though, is that can the person look at because the person know the information that's being discussed? John definitely qualifies for that, right? And then can the person be impartial from their stances of the information coming out? I think most people would
Honestly, yeah,
agree that
John
John
actually
would.
would have been a better judge, yeah, because I don't know, because maybe from a Christian perspective, maybe it was because Christians don't really accept deism or whatever else. But if you're looking from a atheist perspective, any claim to God, right, there's going to be I don't know, just a disproportionate amount there.
Right, but
But
they're
they
supposed to be
weren't
taking a neutral
judging. They
stance,
weren't
though,
judging
right?
the claims, though.
They're
They
just
weren't
judging the
judging the claims.
arguments.
They were judging the responses and whether or not they were logical. It was
Yeah,
all a matter of, is this a logical response? Did you have a good response, or did you just come out flailing with no idea what to say?
right.
I mean, look at the. I mean, look at how close the score was, like to everything. Like, how can you not? How can you say? How can you
Because
say it was
you could
unbiased,
deduce, yeah.
especially when you consider what seemed to be the general attitude of the audience? I mean, I don't know, Coco. Did you release the audience
No, that's
score?
not.
I haven't, but like basically, I'm gonna tally up the score within the next 48 hours. The audience can DM me, and
No,
Yeah,
didn't
that
you
actually goes for me, sir, right? Because the audience score was so much, it was so much in favor of cease, actually. So to see the judges,
right?
right, having
That's my
that,
point.
Right, but that's
I
why he
feel
has
like that's just
perspective.
your
That's why
bias
that's the
proof,
thing. If
though.
you see
I
the
don't feel
judges
like
have
that's
that
accurate.
perspective,
Well, why don't you
it's
ask
just the
Bart? Bart is the
degree, it's the
person.
degree of their bias
Wait,
that's
the
going to be
person that
limited.
affects the most is Bart than anybody else in here, right? And so, I mean, I don't know what's Bart's take on it because he's the one who was actually in the debate.
I
Obviously.
participated with Co in selecting the judges, and I was satisfied with the selection in general because I think we tried to do our best to get a fair cross section of this topic represented on the panel, and I think we did the best we could. We got two atheists, two theists, and or rather, one theist, one deist, and one agnostic. I don't think that there was bias necessarily against me. If there was, that it's not something that anything concrete I can point to. Prook maybe has a different take on what happened. So I can't say that I have anything outstanding against the judges. I felt that we had the fairest or one of the fairest compositions we could have had.
and then also
Yeah. When we're talking about two atheists, one agnostic, and a quasi-deist,
Bro,
right?
he just went over it. This is the person that got judged. He just went over it.
I know, but
And I
it's
think
still.
and I think Bart would probably agree, the biggest thing that was counted against was really the whole thing was about agency and was with definition of agency. I think, I think if they could have had a thing in the beginning where they agreed to the terms and that was known, and then they just moved past because so much was spent just on defining it. That we didn't really get to like substance of other things like what Bart was trying to get to because everything was being backtracked back to agency, and Bart just by default he's on the defense because he has a different definition of what other people are going to assume that agency is, so he has to do extra work to try to explain that. So I think those were probably the biggest factors that was against Bart. I think if you could have cleared up the agency, I think if you could have made the points more concise, it was very close. I think you definitely would have had
Yeah.
people voted in the other affirmant. I think it
Yeah, I
literally
think
was
you would have
just
won
those
if you
things
had
right
the
there.
agency covered. Just that
Right,
part alone would have given him more
right.
points.
But Bart definitely had a better knowledge of being prepared too with different styles and different information that he was bringing up. So I was
Yeah,
actually impressed with the opening statement. I thought Bart did a good job at that. But yeah,
Yeah, but if
that's how I viewed it, and I'm trying
yeah,
to be
but
as impartial as I
if it's
can.
close, right, and people are seeing that it's close even through examining the debate or whatever else, and then they're going to their judgments, right? That's reflective of what they judged it at, but it doesn't take away from the bias that they would have had coming into that scoring. I mean, they perceived it as close. They didn't necessarily. I wouldn't say most of the panel understood some of the terminology,
So
maybe.
who should have been
So
selected then?
given that, it doesn't.
So what other people should have been selected?
I
but then
mean, one
That's
of
also
the
the
problem,
atheists
and
gave it
that's what
to
I said with the
Bart.
best
One
resources.
of the theists gave it to Bart, and the two that didn't are that what was it? The deist and the other atheist. Or the
I think Jim
agnostic.
gave
Sorry,
it
the
to Bart,
agnostic and
right?
the
Did
deist
Jim?
was it that
Yeah, I
didn't
think
give it to like?
Daragon.
I would call Placide an agnostic. I mean, he's a quasi. Like, he's not really deist. He's never.
But also
He's
really
never.
quick,
He's not an atheist, though.
but also really
He's
quick,
not.
Wit wants to know why Pruk thinks she's a bad judge.
I don't think I need to speak on that.
Who would you say then has to be the judge then?
Yeah, I would say it would have to be if we're talking about a deist thing, maybe from a you can get
Shark.
religious perspective, agnostic perspective.
Shark.
You can get those types of judges.
Shark would vote for me blind.
I know.
But
I saw
it's
him
so
in the
deep,
first
right?
minute as soon as
Like
you said your
picking a
first
judge.
word.
Also, you
He
have
was
to
like,
know
"Well,
that.
Bart won the end of the debate" or something like that.
Yeah.
It's deep. I mean, they need to know it very well, right? The judges need to know
Yeah,
the
of
content
course.
very well, or they're going to perceive it as if it was really even because there are some things that they had missed. But it seems like the flow of conversation.
Right, that was my right. That, but I already went over that. Right, you have to understand the content of what's going to be said.
Right.
Right, and then there has to be somebody that's going to be who you feel is going to be impartial to the information. Right, somebody
I
with,
didn't see
with
both.
good
I didn't see
character.
both of those characteristics being
Right, somebody with good character. Right, that you feel is viewed as that can be impartial. Right, like Juju has great information. Like he's very intelligent. He's very smart. But is he impartial? I don't know him enough to say yes or no. But if I get to know him and I think he's very impartial, then I would say Juju would be a good person for judge because he can understand the content, and then if he could be impartial. But I don't know him, right? So the
Yeah,
biggest
I feel
factor is
like they
to
picked a
say,
good impartial.
right.
As
The biggest factor
impartial
is
as
to
you're going to
say,
get, I feel like they picked.
right.
Knowing
The
Juju,
biggest
there's
factor is to
no
say who is going to be
combination of
impartial.
also knowing the terminology so well that you could actually, say who won on this type of argument when it comes to terms and philosophy or whatever else. And I'm not saying that the panel wasn't versed in that whatsoever. I'm just saying
They're
that
all versed in
you
that.
have
They
to
all have
compensate.
they all have these type of debates. I don't know any of them
Yeah,
that
I didn't
don't
say
have
that,
these.
right? But it's a combination of the two. There needs to be a balance between that impartial aspect and the knowledge aspect. So if there's going to be this, then the knowledge aspect that the judges would need to be higher. I mean, if you got 4 people that are not theists, or
You're never going to get
I think you're
impartiality,
just
though.
stuck
That's
in this
what we're
bias
saying.
thing. I just think you're just stuck in this bias thing, and I don't
Yeah.
understand.
I think I've said enough about it. I think if you're talking about two characteristics, impartiality and I don't know, the knowledge. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think it really was sufficient.
You're saying you'd rather have someone that knew more about the topics that was biased than someone that was unbiased that didn't know quite as much.
Well, yeah, it would be a balance. I would ideally
What do you
want
mean by
somebody
a
who
balance?
knows.
The inability to stop your
compensate.
bias is
No, that's not
automatically
what
a
I'm saying.
negative in this situation on a
To
debate.
compensate for the
No, you can't compensate that way, though.
yeah, I mean, you could keep it at the
You
level it's
sacrifice
at, right?
sacrifice the quality of the judge.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. You could keep it at the level it's at with all the people with their beliefs, right? But even if it's at the level it's at, I would say it would need to be compensated more in the knowledge department regarding this.
From who? Who has more knowledge that's unbiased?
Yeah, given the resources we had to get judges, yeah, I mean, this was a good panel. I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to knock anybody, right?
But you are though.
What I am
You
saying,
are
no,
because you came in saying that it was
that's
skewed.
given the resources we have, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's
So who else would you get? That's what I'm asking.
exactly. That's what I'm saying. I don't know, but
Okay,
given,
so then we got the perfect people for this type of context.
Thank you
I
for your
don't-
input, Proc.
not necessarily because it's just by the resources that we.
Well, you haven't provided an alternative, so the best that we know of is the one that we got.
Would you rather have Darth in there being a judge?
No.
Would you rather have like cats in there?
No, but it's
Okay.
irrelevant to the
saying,
point
it's
of
like-
the panel
I think-
itself, right? I mean, yeah,
I understand. I understand what
due
you're saying
diligence.
about bias, and it's not something we can completely eliminate. But again, I worked with Co and Cease as well to kind of agree on the judges. And again, I actually wanted to get Bought by Blood as one of the Christian judges, but he couldn't make it because I think John, despite being
Bought by Blood would have voted against you, like from the offset. So,
well, perhaps, but I feel that honestly, if I hadn't even beefed with J. Mike and Amdir, I would have loved to have them on the panel because I think that they can hone in. And this is really what, like, I feel the judges were fair overall, but I think they were more swayed by the issue with definitions, right? Like
They
Cease,
were. I think so.
yeah,
That's what I mean.
Cease did not.
He's a judge. He could tell you, but I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this is what, like, is the only maybe contention that I do have. Like Cease didn't actually address the arguments that I put
No,
forth,
the
right?
issue.
And just 10 seconds, sir.
Yeah.
Even if you grant, right, and I explain why, like, why I disagree with him that naturalism encompasses this, but even if you grant him that, the proposition again for the debate was belief in the existence of God is rational. So if
Right.
you agree with this definition of God and the sources that I provided, like the Einsof, I substantiated the proposition, and his counter of this is naturalism is really just irrelevant. It's just a non sequitur. So
Well,
like that's my only that was my only, like,
it's not
I guess.
because there's not really any distinction between your position and his, other than you're calling it an agent.
Well, if that's the agreed definition of God and I substantiated the rationality, then him encompassing naturalism or having that included in naturalism doesn't actually address the proposition. He was essentially just
now
saying,
we're just talking semantics. Like, who gives a hoot?
yeah,
What you're
Yeah,
talking
but that
about
was
is
the whole debate, though.
yeah, but that was the debate, and the agency issue again. It boiled down to the mechanism that we ascribe to agents, right? And that's why I use that definition as opposed to just some general capacity. And I kind of gave the example of, like, well, wind has the capacity to do stuff, but we're not going to call wind an agent, right? So the point that I was making there is that these definitions seem to, as Robbie said, have controlled the outcome. So,
But actually, what did you guys think about the format? I might add a
way too
section.
long, way too fucking long.
Way too long.
I think it needs to be. I think there needs to be less. It needs to be less formal. Honestly, what you need to do, what I think, my opinion, is that they should be a short opening, a couple minutes each, and then there should be some sort of question period where, like, Bart gets to ask C's 10 questions and control the pace of the questions and how they're answered, and then vice versa, and then there should be a rebuttal and some sort of closing.
I thought the way it was formatted was actually very, very good. I think it's a big step up from what we're doing with the informal to the formal. And I think, maybe as far as time's concerned with what Sir was saying, the 7-minute opening, I don't know. That's what they agreed on beforehand. It was supposed to be a 5-minute opening. But given everything that I saw, it was a good step up. I think it's the way you need to go, Mr. Ko. I think it's a really good implementation to your content and, whatever you desire to achieve as far as debating goes. I think it was good.
I think
I think
it
it
was
was
fine.
bad.
I think it was
I
too
think it was
long.
like pretty terrible. I think it was bad.
I think it
But
was fine. I think it was too long.
like
I
the
would take up
cock
the
is pretty big, by the
breaks.
way. I have a big cock, a big black cock actually. And
Oh,
do you want to see my big
yeah,
black?
can we kick him out already before he gets
Yeah,
done?
I didn't add him. I just kicked him. I think it was too long. I definitely agree with Thrown there. And then the breaks just didn't make, because you're like, okay, they're starting to kind of get into, it's like, okay, well, we'll be right back after this commercial break, and just like play
Right.
the
I would
music.
agree
And
with that.
I would just like keep to me, it just made no sense, right? Like I would just keep going.
You were
And
here for
then
2.5 hours.
right. And then you kind of had like judges ask questions in between there. But I would just have just do the thing 5 minutes in between and then have them kind of discuss stuff. And then the end, right, have like when they're done summing it up, they're closing, then have like judges ask them questions. And then you can open it up to like maybe like 3 people or something like that. We don't need a whole bunch of people asking questions, or 4 people, 2 for Bart. Just take it like that: 2 for Bart and then 2 for Cease or something, and then just kind of close it out.
Yeah, you should probably set the guest who gets to ask the questions beforehand. Like have people, like, I don't know, maybe you can set up some kind of competition beforehand of who gets to win to be a guest to ask questions. But the timing as well, I think you definitely need to have shorter times. Like any kind of rebuttal should be no more than 2 minutes, definitely.
When's the food debate?
Hmm?
Okay. When's the food debate, Coco?
I have to think about how I'm gonna advertise it, and then get with both of the people, and then probably, yeah, I'll definitely edit the format of the debate.
It,
Is it
Then
veganism?
it's about
Listen, it's too important of a topic for. I'm too biased on it.
it's
Um,
wait, hold up, I have it right here. It's food ontology between Admir and Becca.
food
Admir or
ontology.
Amdir?
Admir.
And dear.
and then one
Yeah.
more thing, kind of like what we were not
I
trying
think
to
it's Amdir.
get it back to the thing, but I noticed when we did bring it up to guests asking questions, it was all pure Bart. Bart, I have a question. Bart, I have a
Right.
question. Hey, Bart, you know what? I got another question. My question originally was for Bart, but I noticed like Cease is not getting anything, so that's why I was kind of like, well, Cease, like this could go to you too. But I don't think it's fair that like Bart just has to get like, and I think some of it is
Right.
generally people have questions, but it shouldn't be just with Bart's just getting hammered with question after question after question. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like so.
Robbie, absolutely. I completely
Oh,
agree. I mean,
thanks,
when
Robbie.
people were coming up, yeah, it was like 5 questions in a row. It seemed like they were trying to start or instigate something. They disagreed with Bart, and you got like 4 atheists coming after Bart on the panel that you invited up.
Right.
It's a lot of strain. Like it's a drain on people's mental, right? And
Right.
that's important.
I try to keep my question like a neutral because like I said, I felt like for Bart, the only way that he was going to win was to persuade them with the agency. So that's why I asked him that question so that way he could like try to say, well, his one doesn't make sense and you must use mine instead. To try to make it fair, right? And then Bart can answer, not Bart, Cease could say, well, Bart's not right. You have to use mine. I think it should be more like drawn, like questions like that type of a thing. Because I did notice like they were arguing like Bart's position of which they can do, I guess. It depends what you want to do. But it just seems like it was more combative for some of the things. And Bart's kind of should be that should be past that point. Bart should just be like answering like clarifying questions that people have in the audience and stuff like that. And C should be doing the same thing. It shouldn't be like another they're kind of getting into it for different propositions and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
Sure.
feel like
Yeah,
a
I think it would have
political.
better
Sorry, go
structured.
ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you, Robbie. I think it would have been better structured, just kind of like having a more loose discussion regarding as you said, clarifying issues. But I didn't get any kind of malice or vindication from Amdir or J Mike. I think they were sincere. They did want me to clarify what I meant about agency and whether if I would agree that, like, let's say if a rock can perform an action without any causal determinacy, yeah, it would have agency if it could do that. Anything would have agency if it could do that, and that's what I was getting at. But yeah, I think it kind of ended up being a dog pile on me for the questions.
That's
Yeah,
why
I think
when
Coco,
I
what
came
you
up, I was like, I have a question. It's for Bart. It's like, damn.
Yeah, I think Coco, like I said, if you have you predefine who's going to come up and ask questions, it might be better. But if you don't want to do that path, you could also, when you bring somebody up to ask a question, tell them they get to ask one question. Once they ask their question, kick them out.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that way they can't just keep taking over the conversation and asking more and more questions. And then whoever they ask the question to can respond, and then you can go on to the next guests to ask
Right.
the next question.
Right. I think
But
social brings up a good point with that because, like, I feel like J Mike's very smart, or Adnia, right? And I kind of feel like when they're asking their questions, and they're asking more, like detail about it, it could persuade because we're trying to be neutral, right? I think it could persuade more with the judges to say, well, look, J Mike's very confused on his stance on this. Why should I, right? Why should I adhere to his stance when J Mike is so confused on it?
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like it could just have been a little bit better in that aspect. And it seemed like you also didn't have any kind of time frame on the questions when they asked or whatnot. You were like, you can ask one, and then you said, look, one or two. So it would help if you had the question, like all of that already planned out as to how long the question can be, and how long the answer can be as well. That way you're not just having rambling.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. To keep it consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think for a first formal debate on your channel, it went great
Oh
overall.
yeah.
I really enjoyed discussing the topic with Cease, and this actually helped me as well because I haven't been in a formal debate since college, honestly. So and it was much more structured there naturally, but for what we got here, given it was your first formal debate on your channel, I think it was still a great event.
I thought it was
Oh,
great.
phenomenal.
I thought it was, yeah, right. It's phenomenal. I think this is the way you should go down. And I wish I could be in your position to moderate some of these really cool debates. So I think you have something really good going. And I would just keep going with that, with the informal and the formal. And then, you could build in other places, YouTube or whatever. So I think it's really cool.
Better than the debate I did with you and Rob.
I'm kind of jealous, honestly. You kind of hopped in and started doing these things,
debate.
Coco.
I wouldn't even call that a debate because it
No,
was so
I believe me, I know.
It was
I
so
am.
informal. So I wouldn't call that a debate necessarily, even. But maybe it is an informal debate, not a formal one.
Yeah, it was. I know. I was just kind of making a joke,
The
right?
fun part of
Because it
that
was last
debate.
minute, and then like I felt so weird because he wouldn't message you, you couldn't message him. You guys were constantly messaging me, and it was like, I can do it tonight at 10. Oh, I can't do it tonight. I can do it at 11. Can you do 11? I don't know. Ask him. Well, I got
Yeah,
stuff
so
to
so
do.
we agreed on Tuesday. He dropped out of Tuesday, and then we had to do Monday because he said, okay, this can work, but he still was unsure on that. And then eventually, like hours in, we got to the
Right.
understanding that they were doing. So
And then it
it
was
was
like,
really weird. It was really
right.
weird.
And then it's like, what's the topic? Oh, I want this to be the topic. Okay, well, what do you want? Well, I don't want that to be the topic. It has to be this. Okay, well, do you want to do two topics? Yeah, I'll do two topics. The other person, no, I don't want to do two. I don't want to do their topic. I only want to do my topic. So it's just like,
Right.
it's like, right.
The best
You
part
guys are
about
like, yeah, we want to do it later on tonight, but I'm like, I don't know what the hell we're talking
No, that
about.
was a time change from Rob too, just for the record, right? I was doing it on Tuesday, then Rob was
Right,
like, I can't do it on
right,
Tuesday.
right. Originally it was supposed to be Tuesday, and then a last minute, you guys wanted to do it Monday.
Yeah, and I told him he was running, and I was like, "Oh, you don't want to do the debate," and I asked him like, "When else can you do it?" And then eventually, like last minute, he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna do it on Monday, today." So that's kind of how it goes for context, but yeah.
Also,
Hey, and
you guys,
Coco, if you need a judge sometime, I'm willing to judge
okay.
once or twice.
And you're
Yeah,
atheist,
Social
right?
actually considered you as well, but we had already had the slot filled.
Oh
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that's fine.
yeah, and like I have
Yeah,
a
Today
so
wouldn't have been a good day, anyways. I dropped my phone in the pool. I had to
Sorry.
get my backup phone and get it activated today. I would have not been able to make it in time.
But consider if you were on the panel that sequence of causally determined events might not have occurred, and it would have been a different sequence of causally determined events.
Well, maybe you're right. Could have been. I could have
Right.
had saved my phone from sitting in a pile of rice right now.
yeah, in the
actually,
future, if we're
if you
gonna have
guys
another
could,
formal debate with like Bart and Cease, I think Social should be on the panel, and maybe not a panel of 5, maybe 4, but we could do 5. I mean, it's just about the quality of what we're saying between we have a disagreement on it, but I think Social should be there, and I think maybe you guys should debate again, but honestly, maybe not, because this is kind of a limited kind of idea that you guys were talking about as far as terms are concerned, so it might not be necessary, but going forward, yeah, Social should be judge.
How about we do the next debate, Pruk versus J Mike?
Yeah, he's just gonna pull a bunch of philosophical terminology that I am not at all
I
familiar
know.
with.
That's good.
And then it's just gonna be like, honestly, that debate would go like J Mike would say some shit, and I'd just be like, J Mike, I don't know what you're
Yeah,
saying.
can you please explain?
Yeah, like I don't know what you. Can you take 30 minutes to explain this? So yeah.
yeah. But actually, if you guys could you DM me like all the things that you thought could be improved about my debate structure, and I think I'm gonna adapt it a little bit to make it more sufficient.
But
For
Bart,
sure.
to know that again that you did a good job. Like you said, I guess that you haven't done a debate in a while. I think it was really close. I think if you I know I keep saying the same thing, but I think if you cleared it up,
No, sure.
I think you would have won. But I think it's just sometimes it's the things that make the difference. But yeah, I think if you get a little bit more sharp with it, I think you'll do well.
I agree.
Yeah, I kind
Yeah,
of
and
surprised that Cease won.
well, thank you, Social. I feel that my arguments were stronger, and his main retort was just essentially the definitional aspect, right? And I think, as Robbie says, I could have done better in honing in on why he has actually not established that naturalism encompasses this, given that a non-causal source would not necessarily be subject to naturalistic investigation, not to mention that he hasn't excluded infinite regress, which I did. So I had a symmetry breaker, he didn't. And secondly, even if you grant that naturalism includes this, then you're still left with the baseline proposition of belief in the existence of God is rational, and that is the debate. That's the entire debate. So you would have to attack the definition of God based off of the sources that I provided and the God concept from which it originates, and he never did that, right? He just kind of like I think he assumed that that's what he was doing when he said naturalism already encompasses this. So I still feel I did better on the argumentation, but as far as Cease's style, I think he's more experienced in debate overall because he goes live much more often, and I feel that I don't know if you guys would agree with me here, but I feel that Cease's tone kind of has a more of a dispassionate and even keel, as opposed to mine, where I might feel it might seem that I'm getting emotional even if I'm not. Did anybody pick up something like that? Because I would love to hear your feedback on that point.
No, I didn't feel like you were emotional. I felt like you and Cease both kind of weren't emotional in that aspect. But I'm friends with Cease, so I kind of know his talking style and stuff. And I don't know if I'm friends with you, Bart, or not, but maybe I am.
Yeah, Bart, you were definitely emotional. Good acquaintances, I would say.
But I know your kind of talking style as well, and I don't think that there was anything wrong with the way that you talked. I did feel like I wasn't here for the beginning part of it, so I missed the opening statements. But just from the aspect of Cease not having an opening statement, that kind of speaks volumes as far as like preparedness goes. So I think that in that aspect, that's why I was surprised that he won. If one person is very prepared and the other person is not, I kind of feel like in most conversations that I get in with Cease, he kind of just, even in the debates that he holds, it's very just kind of off the cuff. Like he doesn't have a prepared statement for anything. He's just like flying with whatever kind of response comes to mind. And I feel like the reason that his responses sound similar all the time is because of that. Like, because he's not actually fully addressing it in a new way. He's just repeating what he's addressed in previous conversations. And that's why I was surprised that he won. But, I mean, it is what it is. I think it's very difficult to judge these types of events, and maybe Coco, maybe it would be a good idea to keep the same judges and not like add me in. But if you could keep the same judges, so they have, multiple opportunities to hone their skill of judging as well, so that they're not. Yeah, because if they're just doing it one off, like the first time you judge something like this, it's going to be new and you might miss things and you might not have a structure for yourself on how you're writing everything out. And I feel like maybe they could have done a better job on the judging part had they had previous experience with it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if you look at average Justin, I would say, just given by his the evidence that I've seen of him coming on with his atheist streams, right? I would say that the point difference for average Justin was the most between Bart and Cease. He gave it a 5-point difference, and so it's actually evidence that there is bias.
But you'd have to show that it was based off it, right? But you'd have to show that he was basing that 5-point difference off of like him being atheist and just trying to agree with Cease only because he's an atheist.
Well, my evidence would be that he would have amongst the panel, if he's going on streams, to fight against the theistic concept, I would say.
But that's just a point from blindness. Bias. You don't know what his notes were. You don't know which part gave him points and lost points.
Yeah, that's all true. But it adds up.
And you're also saying his character is off too, then.
Yeah, you're making a
Not
character judgment
necessarily.
there
I'm not
too.
saying you have a bad character because you're
Well,
biased
no,
on
no,
the
because
position.
right, but what I'm saying is they've all agreed to be impartial into the thing, right? And you're saying, well, he's not impartial because he's an atheist, so he can't be impartial because I've seen him live and he's not impartial in this whole thing, right? That's like someone coming to you and saying, "Hey, Prue, could you be an honest judge of something or whatever?" And you go, "You know what? I can be an honest judge. You can trust me. I won't be impartial to anything." And then people go, "You know what? That's Prue. He cannot be impartial. He's lying to you." Of course, he's going to always side with the theist because he's impartial. He's just really biased, right? So they're making a judgment call on your character, right? At that same sense, and you're kind of doing the same thing on them, right? They came in, they all talked to everybody. They said that they would be unbiased. I don't see any reason to say that they protrude on that, right?
But here's the problem, right? Because the clarifying questions that maybe Justin asked or whoever on the panel, a lot of the times, especially what I heard from Justin, it was just a clarifying question that, they had been talking about for so long. And so I was just, thinking to myself, like, okay, if Justin isn't getting the depth of this conversation and he has these biases baked in based on the evidence that I've seen of him, and we're seeing a 5-point difference.
Yeah, you're just making a.
He is getting
You just admitted that you're doing this as your bias on Justin, and you're making an accusation against his character.
I gave evidence. I said the clarifying question he asked was a clarifying question on things that they had talked about for like 20 minutes straight, right?
Well,
you're making a judgment on his character.
Clarifying one, you can't. You're saying they can never ask a clarifying question from something, and then two, right? Maybe he wants to again reaffirm the position, right, that maybe Bart was having, because the whole thing stems from agency, right? There's a definition of agency that pretty much everybody will adhere to, right? When you say that. Now, Bart is coming out with a different term for encompassing agency, right? So I don't see what the issue is, right? If he wants to judge more fair to, hey, again, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your view on this.
Right, but to be a judge, he should have understood that view. He shouldn't have even asked a clarifying question so deep into
it. You don't. That's not how it works. You can't just understand everything. That's what the whole point of having them ask clarifying questions is for.
You're saying judge on things that they wouldn't understand and then just make the judgment on things that they're confused about. I don't understand how that would make more sense.
Yeah, because he shouldn't have been confused on that. That agency point, that was literally what they were talking about for so long.
I don't think he was confused on it. I think
why did he ask a clarifying question about it? He was confused.
Everybody asked a question. The whole debate was about
affirm their understanding.
Ask a clarifying question on something basic, right? And that they
but you can do that to affirm your understanding, to make sure that you wrote it down properly, that you've affirming your understanding of it. You're just is an affirming question. That's all it is.
Yeah, I mean, I understand to that extent, right? But he could have affirmed it himself based on his understanding of what they were talking about.
How can he affirm
what I'm saying. That's my whole point.
Bart believes? How can he affirm what Bart believes by himself without asking Bart? Like, if Bart's right here, the best way to do it is just ask Bart.
Hey, Bart, this is how I'm interpreting this. This is what you said. Do I have the correct notion of how you're using this term? There's nothing wrong there, right? I have to understand what is Bart coming up with and the way that he's describing things and the way that he accepts things, right? And so I really don't understand the issue. If you're having somebody who's asking a clarifying question, I really don't understand.
No, the issue is he asked a clarifying question where a judge that would be sufficient for this type of matter wouldn't ask that clarifying question because he had listened to the conversation for so long that he could affirm it himself. The conversation wasn't that hard to follow, that where a judge needs to ask a clarifying question on such a basic fundamental point of the conversation.
But it wasn't fundamental because that was the whole debate. The whole debate was basically on agency and the way that we define it and the way that we use it and everything else in its compass. Right. So you're saying, well, it's a basic thing and he should know this. Well, the basic terminology is probably going to be the definition textbook. Well, Bart is not going by definition textbook. He's adding more. He's adding more into it.
So Justin should have clarified on that point, not on the point that he tried to clarify, which was he was saying that what do you mean with
you're making assumptions on what Justin's thoughts were. Like you don't know what his thoughts were in the whole situation.
Bro. I'm based on what he said. the clarifying question he had for Bart in the middle of this debate, where he should have been able to affirm it himself. That if we're balancing between partiality and knowledge, then that's just a weak judge, right?
You've had debates with Justin before, and this sounds like you have a bias to Justin, and that you have some kind of disagreement
I've actually
with him.
no, I actually haven't had debates with Justin. I was
Well,
on
you're making all these judgments against his character, and you're
right.
the
And
fact
you just
that you're
made a
making
judgment on my
continuous
character.
judgments on his
You just made a
character.
judgment on my character. You said that because
Yes,
I've had
I'm
debates, which I
absolutely
haven't had
judging you on
debates
your
with Justin.
character, dude. Like that's what I'm absolutely. I admit that.
Exactly. So it's self-contradictory.
And you should admit it as well.
It's self-contradictory, bro.
No, it's not self-contradictory. I am being judgmental of your character based on the fact that
Right, and I'm being judgmental on him based on his clarifying questions and the evidence that I've seen. Right, that's what I'm telling you, bro. So where are we missing? Like where are we not agree?
Well, guys, I felt still that generally overall
seriously, this is
the judges were fair. I didn't really pick up any distinct bias one way or the other. Maybe Prook saw it differently. I mean, Sir came down to like just a 1.5 difference. Just Jim came down to a 1 point difference. So this easily could have flip flopped one way or the other. I'm totally fine with this grading. Maybe there was some point issue with how we allotted the cross-examination. I think when Ko and I and Cease were talking about it, we gave like a ton of points to the cross-examination and a little bit less so to the actual argument. And maybe that's generally preferable because that's where you kind of ferret out weaknesses, right? But that's what like kind of still sticks with me is that like my arguments were not exactly addressed, and I think a lot of what was won over, as Robbie's been saying, is this definitional issue about naturalism, agency, God, and that's what it came down to. So I admit that I could have defended better on the agency principle for sure, but I still feel that my definition is really it's not idiosyncratic. I wouldn't say it's idiosyncratic because if we boil down the idea of agency, if you look it up in just generally in the dictionary, right, it's like the capacity to act. But what the hell does that mean, right? It really derives from this free will determinism debate, and I feel that's what it comes down to, right? This causal independence. And if you don't have causal independence, then you don't really have free will, and it's hard to say you even have agency because at that point you're just as causally determined as anything else. So I felt my definition was sound, and the fact that Justin asked about it, I didn't really see as strange because it's probably not a definition that he's encountered just generally, right? So
but you define it so
I think
many
you're one of the
times,
only ones,
right?
Bart, that I've heard use it that way, and you're pretty much the only person I know on TikTok that has this kind of stance on kind of I don't even necessarily want to say it's creationism, but on this aspect of agency. You're the only one that I've heard with this argument.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm calling this position open deism with it, which is a neologism. It's my own term, and Shark kind of helped me out, in introducing me to deism like a month or two months ago. I mean, I already knew the principles, but I used to call myself a philosophical theist, and I really don't anymore because theism kind of implicates or implies different positions and belief.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in the same boat. At first, I was just calling myself an atheist. When I left religion, I was just like, oh, well, I guess I'm an atheist, and so I started calling myself an atheist. But now I'm more agnostic. I'm not agnostic. I'm agnostic to religious claims, and I think I've come down to that because I've determined through conversation and just through debates that I don't believe that anybody truly has a defined definition of what a god is, and I don't think that it's even possible to technically define that because you can't really define something that you don't fully understand. It's really hard to have a true definition of something that you don't fully understand, and its processes. So I've just come to the conclusion that, yeah, it's possible that something created this world. It's possible that something created this universe. It's possible that it was done naturally as well. It's completely possible on these things, but the definitions just aren't there yet. And so I think the issue lies in defining what is being talked about, not necessarily how it happened. Because I think that it's pretty much impossible to know exactly how it happened. And so these definitions are what will make or break the conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
Also,
And that's kind of what I was getting into. Sorry, Ko, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say I might go to sleep pretty soon. I'm feeling a little bit tired.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
about to take off too, but just to respond to you, social. Yeah, that was partially what I was getting at, as far as like it doesn't make sense to just equate or apply naturalism to a non-causal source of existence, which is especially one with agency, which is what I was defining God as, because we don't even know if naturalism is something that can investigate something that's non-causal, right? Because we live in a causal and temporal existence where we order causal and temporal states, whether through A series or B series of time. So just that, and I was telling this to Cease, right, which is really what confused me, because he kept repeating naturalism, naturalism. And I was stating, what is your argument, right, for why you feel that naturalism would even apply to a non-causal source? And I never got one. But you're
Yeah,
right.
no, I heard that argument several times in there, and I don't
Yeah.
think that Cease fully addressed that. He was. I think I know. I like from other talks with Cease. I think I understand where his points are, but he definitely didn't bring those points out in this argument. As far as naturalism being able to cause itself, where it can be a cause, but it can be a reoccurring cause on itself rather than a outside cause. Which is what I think his belief system is that it's a reoccurring cause. It's not necessarily like one thing caused all of it to start. It's kind of everything continuously causes start and restart and stuff.
Yeah, I think he has kind of like a cyclical model or something like that. But
Yeah,
anyways,
it's kind of like an infinite regress type thing, or in a way.
yeah, and a cyclical model would be an infinite regress, right? I mean, whether or not you assume terms repeat, just because it cycles does not prevent an infinite regress. It just regresses back over whatever positions it already presented. But anyways, it was really fun. Ko, again, thank you so much for hosting this, to the judges, whoever's left in the audience, and of course, it was great following up with you guys, Social Fix It, Robbie, and Pruk. This was a lot of fun for me, and I really was challenged to refine my position so I could present it in this format, and I have an understanding now of how to improve it and present it even better next time.
Yeah, and actually, there will be more, Bart. I want you to debate more people, more opponents.
Yeah,
Well,
Bart, it was so
For sure.
close. It was so close that even Cease coming away from this, how he views maybe, a theistic perspective and whatever else, it's still going to put pressure on him because it was so close. He's smart enough to understand, maybe some things that we even brought up that as part of judgment and the debate flow and whatever else. So I think it's a win-win. I think you did a great job, and yep.
Yeah, I would like to see you debate. Planet Peterson.
I have been on Peterson's live once or twice. I don't think we really got into it, but yeah,
I just mean like
Peterson,
in an aspect like this. I think that in this kind of format, it would be interested to see you and Peterson.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think my arguments hold and they rationalize the belief in a non-causal source of existence with agency. And the only way around this, right, that I see is somebody just saying, "Oh, that's just naturalism." But I just don't see. First of all, I just don't see that as a convincing argument, because you could kind of like just make that a claim for almost anything, right? Just kind of like, enlarge your definition, and then you don't have to respond to the actual substance of your opponent's arguments.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to debate you on this topic because I feel like I would have to just come to a point of conceding to the fact of the unknown part of this, and that it is plausible but unlikely based on my beliefs, I guess you could say. But then it kind of wouldn't there wouldn't be a way to argue it like the way that Cease was trying to argue it. It's kind of difficult to argue some of these small nuances, you know. You can't really say that, oh, well, it wasn't caused. And like, why wasn't it? Like, how do you argue that it wasn't caused?
Yeah, that was my very first syllogism, right? Is like, this is why we reach the non-causal source in the first place, is because causality, right, cannot originate existence. Because if a cause originated existence, a cause would already exist, right?
Yeah,
so that's how you get to the non-causal aspect. But I think
it's like trying to describe emptiness. Like I heard somebody say, well, space. I heard an argument earlier today that space exists even without anything in it. I'm like, no, it doesn't. And they're like, well, space exists separate from time, and I'm like, no, it doesn't. If you don't have anything in said space doesn't exist. It's basically like a vacuum. It's similar to if you suck everything out of a can of something. There's no actual space in that can anymore. It collapses in because there's nothing there to hold it in place. Like it's
I guess it would depend on like what they're even like. I mean, if you're like creating a vacuum, for example, within a compartment, like there would be no, I guess, material or matter energy within that vacuum, aside from maybe neutrinos or cosmic rays or something passing through it. But I think dimensionally, people would still say, right, like that space dimensionally is there. Although I'm not sure exactly what sense you mean it in.
I view it as that space doesn't actually. There's no because it's nothing there. You can't say that that's space. It is. There is not an actual thing there to call space. You think it's empty on the inside and that there's space between the two sides, but in reality, all you have succeeded in doing is warping time. You've warped time in an area, but you didn't remove space. Like you didn't like cause there to be space.
Okay. Yeah, I would probably have to brush up on my physics to really refine my position there. But I think if with some study, you would just be you would be able to discuss this topic with me, and maybe even have a strong position. So I wouldn't sell yourself short at all on that issue.
Hey guys, can I just ask you a quick question before everybody gets the hell out of here? So you take the same position that I do. I just recently found this position, and it kind of vibed with me because I've always been a word guy. But have you noticed like pushback on your position being agnostic?
Jay, are you talking to Co?
No, that's just social.
No,
He's asking social
for
because
me?
you both wrote the same thing. Jay's agnostic, and so he's asking you because I guess you've been it for a bit. He's just coming into it.
Yeah. So as far as being agnostic, I haven't really had a lot of pushback on that. Most people agree that the terminology of God is defined differently by everybody. Like if you asked 100 Christians in a room to define God, they're all going to define it slightly differently, No, the only pushback I've had is from some people during a debate. They will say, well, no, God is considered you can define it as simple as just saying it's a creator. Just that one word, creator, would be what God is. And my response to that is always, well, no, because some people literally have God as being the sun. The sun didn't actually create anything, but they call that a God because it provides sunlight for
Could
us.
you just say like an uncaused caused?
So it's like, yeah, I mean, somebody can say an uncaused cause, but
Wouldn't that
then
be
in
the
that aspect,
simplest? Right, but wouldn't that be the simplest?
but again, that comes down to the aspect of their the moment that they change up their story on what God is, and then I'm like, well, there you just proved my point that there is no true definition of God.
I'm saying, well,
You know?
I'm saying you can come up with like omni properties and everything else, but I'm saying if you're just talking about like the simplest form of what a God is, wouldn't you say it's an uncaused caused? Right.
I mean, somebody can make that claim, yeah, but most
Absolutely.
people don't.
Yeah, that's really what I was getting at,
right, Bart?
Robbie.
Am I wrong on that? I think
Yeah,
that's
no,
the
you're
simplest.
absolutely right. That's what I was getting at. That the God concept originates from a question of metaphysical ultimacy, right? The question of existential origins, and that's where this idea originates. And then it's kind of like defined or goes through this process of getting adorned with all kinds of different characteristics and attributes. But at its core, it's this question of hypostasis of a monad, this substance that underpins existence, either sustains it or defines it or causes it, and that is the God concept, right? And that's why this notion of an uncaused or as I say, a non-causal source of existence, which is not causally determined by definition, thereby would have agency. This is the unadorned and unadulterated definition of God. Anything else would be a religious add-on.
Like a diamond.
And so, look, the issue I mostly have with this whole concept of God, the definitions of God, the arguments of God is that a definition isn't just a string of words that describe something. I mean, there's more to a definition than just what we find in like a dictionary or something like that. I mean, we have all of these different concepts that apply to a God or the God or that type of thing. So when I'm having conversations with people, I don't just need to know like what the words are that you're using to describe this thing, because that's pretty much what a definition is, just a description of a particular word. But I need to know what the concept is behind that definition. So that's what's important to me when having a conversation with someone, because someone could say, yeah, God is the eternal uncaused cause, and yes, I can define every single one of those words, but there's a concept and a thought process behind that. I'm talking to a person because they may see uncaused cause as something different than what the definition actually is. And so the important thing, I started thinking the important thing is to know what they're talking about so that I can come to an understanding and then we can have a conversation about it. Because if not, I'm simply talking at the person and not to the person. And
yeah,
that's
Jay,
not
that's exactly what I attempted.
Well, guys, hold on. CO3 is really trying to go to sleep. He put another message in there that he's trying to go to sleep. If you guys want, I can go live for a little bit. Jay, if you want to come,
I'm
social.
good. We could talk a different day. I'm sure
Yeah,
we'll be back in here sometime.
I was about to wrap it up and mention that Co's going to sleep as well. But
Good night, Co.
Good point.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. Yeah, I'll see you guys later.
Good night,
Co,
everybody.
thank you again so much for hosting this. Sorry about going over time, and get some sleep. Appreciate you.
Yeah, good job, Co. Keep it up. I think it's really good. Keep on this trajectory. It's good.
Yeah, and Jay, we'll talk more about this. I'm sure later on.
Yeah. I'm gonna pick your brain too a little bit.
Good night, guys. Appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, see you, Bart. See y'all.
See you, Pruck. Bye.
Yeah.